The imaginary mirror technique. The imaginary mirror technique is a mysterious yet captivating psychological method that harnesses your mind's ability to perceive itself from outside its usual perspective. Imagine, just for a moment, that you could see your own thoughts as though watching them in a reflective surface, observing their flow without becoming entangled. This simple yet surprisingly powerful mental maneuver quietly shifts the dynamics of your inner world, helping you dissolve stress and anxiety almost effortlessly. Think about the last time you found yourself stuck in an endless loop of negative thoughts. Perhaps it was the memory of a difficult conversation replaying over and over, causing discomfort or frustration. Maybe you worried persistently about something you said or did, losing sleep as your mind cycled through scenarios you wish you could rewrite. Normally, your mind identifies deeply with these thoughts, treating them as absolute truths. But with the imaginary mirror technique, you step back and become an observer, neutral and detached, as if watching someone else in a distant room experiencing these very same thoughts. Here's how it might look in practice. Let's say Emily struggles nightly with the memory of a recent argument at work. Each night she lies awake, mentally replaying the conflict, caught in a draining spiral of regret and self-blame. Instead of resisting or trying to silence these troubling thoughts, Emily chooses to employ the imaginary mirror technique. She imagines herself standing calmly before a large, ornate mirror. Within its reflective surface, she sees herself clearly, visibly anxious, replaying the argument. As the observer, Emily notices the subtle details, her worried facial expressions, the tension in her posture, the tightening muscles along her jaw and shoulders. As Emily observes these details, something fascinating begins to occur because she's now watching herself objectively rather than being caught up in the drama. Her emotions gradually lose intensity. She acknowledges her anxious thoughts without judgment or resistance. Slowly, the image in the mirror shifts. Emily sees herself becoming calmer, more peaceful, relaxed. Her breathing slows, her shoulders drop, and she observes herself drifting gently into tranquility, the anxious loop dissipating. The effectiveness of the imaginary mirror technique arises from the psychological phenomenon called cognitive distancing, the ability to perceive your thoughts and feelings objectively rather than identifying directly with them. Instead of feeling that you are your anxiety, stress, or negative memories, you become a witness to those experiences. Your perspective shifts from participant to observer, instantly diffusing the emotional power of the experience. By practicing this technique consistently, you teach your mind to naturally adopt this neutral, reflective stance, making emotional balance an easily accessible default. You may wonder why such a simple mental visualization can have such profound effects. When your brain becomes stuck in negative thinking loops, it's usually because you're emotionally engaged, interpreting these thoughts as significant threats or realities. The imaginary mirror technique gently yet persistently reminds your subconscious mind that these thoughts are merely transient mental events. By stepping outside of yourself and looking into this imaginary mirror, your brain naturally reinterprets the experience as neutral, thus reducing stress and anxiety on a neurological level. Tonight, when you feel restless or troubled by persistent worries, close your eyes and visualize yourself stepping in front of this quiet, reflective mirror. Watch your inner world gently unfolding before you, knowing that each observation distances you further from stress and anxiety. Gradually, you'll feel your mind easing, drifting peacefully toward a state of restful sleep, where serenity awaits just beyond the reflective surface. Cognitive loop breaking. Imagine your mind as a spinning wheel, continuously cycling through the same troubling thoughts again and again. It's a scenario we've all encountered, lying awake, replaying events or imagined future disasters, caught in a loop that seems impossible to escape. But what if you had a secret psychological lever, a hidden mechanism that could instantly stop this relentless rotation, freeing your mind to rest peacefully. That secret lever is called cognitive loop breaking, a subtle yet profoundly effective psychological technique designed specifically to interrupt repetitive and intrusive thought cycles. The strength of cognitive loop breaking lies in its elegant simplicity. Your mind, when trapped in a repetitive thought pattern, is essentially operating on autopilot. It repeats a specific worry or memory continuously, often without your conscious permission, like an endless record stuck on repeat. By intentionally introducing something unexpected, a gentle cognitive interruption, you immediately disrupt this automatic cycle, breaking your mind free of its repetitive grip. Picture Sarah, a talented graphic designer who frequently battles nighttime anxieties about upcoming deadlines. Every night, she finds herself mentally looping through endless scenarios of potential failures, missed deadlines, and imaginary disappointments. Her anxiety builds as she becomes increasingly powerless to stop these exhausting thoughts. However, when Sarah learns cognitive loop breaking, her approach dramatically changes. Instead of wrestling against these anxious cycles, Sarah uses a surprising yet effective strategy. Each time she finds herself caught in a loop, she intentionally interrupts it by recalling a random, unrelated image. One night, as her mind begins its usual routine of stress-filled projections, she consciously summons the vivid image of a bright yellow balloon gently floating upward against a brilliant blue sky. The imagery is unrelated, neutral, calming, and completely unexpected. Because it's so disconnected from her anxiety loop, Sarah's subconscious mind is briefly startled, forced to pause its cycle. The balloon interrupts her mental chatter, momentarily breaking the chain. Now, Sarah gently expands this interruption into something more engaging and vivid. She imagines the balloon rising higher, drifting freely with the wind, moving gently towards serene landscapes she's never seen before. Her mind, naturally attracted to novelty and peaceful imagery, now becomes interested in following this pleasant visualization. The anxious loop, once dominant and relentless, weakens and fades, unable to regain its previous strength. Gradually, Sarah's thoughts become calmer and more distant, and before long, she slips effortlessly into a deep, restful sleep. Why does cognitive loop breaking work so effectively? Your brain thrives on patterns, habits, and repetition. By continuously worrying or revisiting troubling thoughts, you unintentionally strengthen the neural pathways responsible for anxiety, making them increasingly automatic. Cognitive loop breaking interrupts this automatic response, creating a momentary confusion or curiosity within your mind. During this brief confusion, your brain is highly receptive to alternative, calmer thoughts or images. Over time, with repeated practice, your mind learns to automatically shift away from anxiety loops when they arise, becoming adept at redirecting itself toward peaceful alternatives. Next time you find yourself trapped in repetitive thoughts, unable to find rest, remember this simple yet powerful technique. Interrupt your loop with something gently startling, quietly surprising, or vividly serene. By briefly disrupting the automatic patterns of your thoughts, you not only free your mind from anxiety's grasp, but also retrain your subconscious to favor calmness and tranquility. Tonight, allow your mind to drift away from endless repetition into peaceful freedom, finally able to rest deeply and awaken refreshed. Time displacement visualization. Have you ever found yourself stuck in an anxious loop, unable to escape troubling thoughts about the past or worries for the future? Imagine possessing a subtle mental skill that could shift you effortlessly out of those heavy thought loops, freeing your mind to rest deeply. This skill, known as time displacement visualization, gently guides your consciousness to a different moment in time, safely distancing you from immediate anxieties and allowing peace to settle in. Think of time like a flowing river. Usually you experience life from a fixed point, stuck on the riverbank, fixating on certain events as they pass. You replay regrets from yesterday or obsess about tomorrow's uncertainties. But time displacement visualization invites you to step away from your current point, letting you float freely to a quieter part of your personal timeline, a place untouched by anxiety. Imagine Clara, a successful yet constantly stressed lawyer. Each night, Clara lies awake, mentally replaying arguments from recent cases or worrying endlessly about meetings she'll have tomorrow. Her mind is trapped in a relentless cycle of tension, robbing her of restful sleep. When Clara learns about time displacement visualization, her approach radically transforms. Tonight, as her familiar cycle of anxiety begins, Clara closes her eyes and deliberately imagines herself drifting gently backward in time, floating softly toward a distant, comforting memory. She pictures herself at age 10, seated beneath a large oak tree on a warm summer afternoon. She feels vividly again the warmth of sunlight filtering through green leaves, the peaceful hum of cicadas in the distance, and the sweet scent of blooming jasmine. Within moments, the tension in her body eases, and her breath naturally deepens and slows. But Clara doesn't just recall this memory. She allows herself to inhabit it fully, experiencing it as vividly as she can. She feels the coolness of the grass beneath her fingertips and listens closely to the gentle rustling leaves above. She consciously distances herself from her immediate anxieties, gently displacing her present worries with soothing sensory details from this peaceful moment in her past. As Clara continues this visualization, something remarkable occurs. Her mind begins to believe in this peaceful place, temporarily convinced that she is genuinely safe and distant from present anxieties. Her brain releases stress-relieving chemicals that soothe her nervous system. Slowly, her thoughts become quieter, softer, distant echoes rather than immediate threats. Before she knows it, Clara gently drifts from visualization into restful sleep, the anxieties of her daily life left far behind. This technique is effective because the brain doesn't strongly distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and actual events. By immersing yourself in a comforting moment from another point in your timeline, your brain temporarily replaces the stress-filled present with a serene past. It gently detaches from anxiety-producing thoughts because in your mind's perception, those worries no longer feel immediate. This subtle shift reduces stress hormones and calms your nervous system, naturally preparing your body for sleep. The beauty of time displacement visualization lies in its versatility. You don't have to rely only on memories. If you prefer, you can imagine yourself in a peaceful, hopeful future moment, perhaps resting contentedly by the sea or relaxing beside someone you love deeply. By mentally stepping out of your current anxious loop and shifting into a quieter, more peaceful moment, you gently teach your mind to release stress naturally. Tonight, when you sense anxiety trying to trap you, gently remind yourself of this powerful trick. Allow your consciousness to drift effortlessly through time, finding a quiet refuge in memories or future dreams. Rest peacefully knowing that your mind now has the gentle power to escape anxiety's hold, floating freely toward deep, restful sleep. The forgotten name paradox. There's a curious moment that often happens when a familiar name or word seems just beyond reach. It sits on the tip of the tongue, hidden in some inaccessible corner of the mind. The harder someone tries to grasp it, the further it slips away, causing frustration and tension. Yet, paradoxically, the very instant they surrender, releasing the urge to find it, the forgotten name suddenly and effortlessly returns. This puzzling phenomenon is known as the forgotten name paradox, and it holds within it a subtle but profound psychological insight, one that can be intentionally used to guide the restless mind toward calm, restful sleep. The paradox works because intense mental effort creates stress, causing the mind to tighten and limit its natural ability to recall. In a desperate attempt to resolve the uncertainty, the mind begins cycling rapidly, searching anxiously through memory, often becoming increasingly entangled in mental tension. Ironically, this urgent striving for answers makes retrieval harder. However, the moment one ceases the effort, relaxing into acceptance that the answer might not immediately surface, something remarkable occurs. The subconscious mind, now free from pressure, effortlessly reveals the elusive information. Consider Michael, who frequently spends hours lying awake at night, mentally replaying awkward conversations and workplace conflicts. His anxious thoughts loop endlessly, fueling his insomnia. Instead of battling directly against these intrusive worries, Michael decides to utilize the forgotten name paradox as a gentle mental tactic. Rather than wrestling with anxiety, he quietly shifts his attention to something minor and neutral, perhaps the name of a character from a childhood movie he cannot quite recall. His mind becomes gently absorbed in this insignificant puzzle, drawn naturally away from anxious thinking. Initially, Michael attempts to recall details about the forgotten character, exploring faint memories of the movie, the actors, the plot. As he engages quietly and calmly with this puzzle, his mental energy subtly shifts away from anxiety. After a few moments, he deliberately releases his effort, acknowledging that the name may simply remain beyond his grasp for now. This surrender reduces mental tension, causing a natural shift toward relaxation. Gradually, Michael's breathing deepens and slows, his muscles begin to relax, and his anxiety dissolves into peaceful neutrality. The forgotten name, once pursued so anxiously, no longer matters as deeply, and his mind naturally moves toward restfulness. By releasing the effortful search, Michael unintentionally teaches his subconscious a valuable lesson. Letting go is the key to easing anxiety and tension. The paradoxical relief of releasing a struggle creates a gentle, restful space within the mind, preparing it for deep, peaceful sleep. This paradox effectively interrupts anxious thought loops because it redirects attention towards something neutral yet subtly engaging. By focusing on a harmless mental puzzle, the anxious thoughts are deprived of their primary source of power, attention. The mind, naturally curious and open, gently follows this benign puzzle, temporarily distancing itself from stressful concerns. Once the tension of searching is deliberately abandoned, the subconscious mind is free to relax, effortlessly dissolving anxiety's grip. Tonight, if sleep feels distant and anxious thoughts stubbornly persist, gently introduce the forgotten name paradox. Quietly attempt to recall an unimportant, slightly elusive detail, something harmless yet subtly intriguing. Allow attention to shift gently toward this minor puzzle, then consciously surrender the search, permitting the mind to soften, release tension, and naturally drift toward rest. In this subtle yet powerful paradox lies the secret to releasing anxiety's hold, guiding restless thoughts into gentle, peaceful sleep. Reverse inner dialogue. Every mind carries a continuous flowing dialogue, quietly narrating thoughts, analyzing experiences, and occasionally fueling anxiety or insomnia. Often, this internal voice narrates in one familiar direction, following a predictable pattern that strengthens anxious loops and intensifies stress. The trick known as reverse inner dialogue skillfully interrupts these repetitive thought cycles by deliberately flipping the direction of the mind's internal conversation. This subtle reversal gently confuses the subconscious, neutralizing anxiety and guiding the restless mind into restful sleep. The essence of reverse inner dialogue lies in consciously reversing mental conversations, literally playing them backward within the mind. Typically, the brain relies on comfortable, familiar narratives that reinforce worries and anxiety. It becomes so accustomed to these mental stories that they occur automatically, reinforcing stress and tension without any conscious permission. Yet, When these internal conversations are intentionally reversed, the brain's predictable patterns are disrupted, creating a momentary mental pause. Within this pause, anxiety loses its grip, allowing tranquility to slip quietly into place. Consider Lisa, a teacher who frequently finds herself lying awake, mentally rehearsing worries about an upcoming parent-teacher meeting. Her internal dialogue runs in a predictable, forward-moving direction, imagining scenarios in which she stumbles over her words or faces uncomfortable questions. Each anxious thought builds upon the last, intensifying her insomnia. Yet tonight, Lisa tries something different. She practices the reverse inner dialogue technique. Instead of attempting to silence or challenge her anxious thoughts directly, Lisa simply and gently begins to reverse the inner dialogue playing in her mind. She deliberately visualizes her anxious sentences running backward, hearing them unfold in reverse order, their meanings quietly dissolving. The phrases, "What if they criticize me?" and "I'm unprepared," reverse into strangely nonsensical sounds and fragmented syllables. This mental exercise initially feels odd, even amusing, gently capturing Lisa's subconscious attention. As Lisa continues to reverse the dialogue, her mind gradually becomes intrigued by the novelty and subtle humor of the reversed phrases. The absurdity of anxious statements rendered backward gently dissolves their emotional impact, softening anxiety's intensity. Soon, Lisa notices a significant reduction in tension, her breathing deepening naturally, muscles releasing stress effortlessly. Her mind, no longer tightly focused on anxiety's predictable narratives, quietly moves toward restful neutrality. Reverse inner dialogue effectively works by exploiting the brain's natural preference for coherent and meaningful narratives. Anxiety thrives on structured, predictable internal stories, often exaggerated and repetitive. By reversing these narratives, their coherence dissolves, transforming troubling worries into nonsensical fragments. The subconscious, momentarily confused by this unusual mental reversal, temporarily ceases fueling anxiety. This temporary confusion creates a cognitive space, a gentle mental pause in which peacefulness naturally emerges. Repeated use of reverse inner dialogue gradually teaches the subconscious to interrupt anxious loops automatically. Over time, the mind becomes accustomed to disrupting anxiety's patterns the moment they begin, reducing the frequency and intensity of stress-filled thoughts. Tonight, if anxiety's familiar narrative starts to spiral, gently and consciously introduce reverse inner dialogue. Allow anxious thoughts to flow momentarily, then carefully visualize or imagine their words, sounds, and sentences running backward, dissolving meaning into gentle absurdity. Feel the relaxation that follows as these familiar anxieties lose coherence, replaced by peaceful quietness. Let this subtle yet powerful reversal softly guide the restless mind toward tranquility, opening the path to deep, restful sleep. Mind maze navigation. Within every restless mind lies an invisible maze, a labyrinth of thoughts, anxieties, and endless mental chatter. Often late at night, this maze becomes increasingly complex, each turn leading deeper into confusion, worry, and insomnia. Mind maze navigation is a subtle psychological tactic that transforms the confusion and chaos of anxious thoughts into an intriguing mental adventure, gently guiding the mind through winding pathways until it reaches clarity, calmness, and restful sleep. This technique works by visualizing anxious or troubling thoughts as parts of a literal maze within the mind. When a mind becomes overwhelmed, it's typically because multiple thoughts compete for attention, each pulling in different directions. Without a clear path forward, anxiety thrives, stress intensifies, and the mind becomes exhausted. But by consciously engaging with these thoughts as if they form a real physical maze, it becomes possible to mentally detach from anxiety, creating a structured way to navigate toward relaxation. Consider Alex, who often finds himself lying awake, mind racing through concerns about his demanding job. Every night, he attempts to silence or suppress these thoughts, but they persist stubbornly, keeping him awake for hours. Tonight, Alex chooses to practice mind maze navigation, shifting his approach entirely. Rather than resisting anxious thoughts, Alex deliberately visualizes himself standing at the entrance to an expansive, beautifully intricate maze. Each winding corridor, he realizes, symbolizes one particular worry or anxious thought. With gentle curiosity, Alex begins to navigate his mental maze. He moves calmly through corridors, carefully observing each worry without becoming emotionally entangled. One passage represents stress over deadlines, another reflects anxiety about workplace relationships, yet another symbolizes deeper insecurities about his capabilities. Instead of engaging directly or reacting emotionally, Alex treats each worry simply as another intriguing turn or pathway in this imaginary labyrinth. As he continues navigating, Alex notices a subtle shift happening in his mind. Because he treats each anxious thought as a neutral pathway, neither good nor bad, merely interesting, the emotional intensity behind those thoughts gradually fades. Anxiety is naturally fueled by emotional reactions, and when Alex remains detached and calm, the anxious energy loses momentum. His mind, absorbed in the gentle adventure of maze exploration, slowly disengages from stress and anxiety. Alex eventually reaches quieter parts of the maze, serene corners where anxious thoughts rarely venture. These calmer regions represent peaceful mental states, places of deep relaxation. Alex chooses to rest here, mentally settling into the tranquil silence found deep within the labyrinth. Without effort, his breathing becomes naturally slower, his body relaxes, and sleep gently overtakes him. Mind maze navigation effectively transforms anxious loops into structured pathways that the mind can calmly and neutrally explore. Anxiety thrives in chaos and confusion, but the moment anxious thoughts are visualized as physical corridors, hallways, or passages, chaos transforms into calm, structured curiosity. This simple mental trick bypasses anxiety's usual power by creating cognitive distancing, enabling the mind to step back and observe thoughts without reacting emotionally. Over time, regular use of mind maze navigation retrains the subconscious mind. Anxious thoughts gradually lose their intensity, becoming just neutral parts of the maze, neither feared nor avoided. The mind learns to approach worries calmly and curiously, rather than reacting automatically with stress and tension. Tonight, if restless thoughts or worries prevent peaceful sleep, gently imagine yourself standing at the entrance to your own intricate mental maze. Move softly and curiously along corridors, exploring without judgment or fear. Notice anxiety dissipating as you move deeper into peaceful, quieter passages. Allow your mind to drift slowly towards serenity, gently guided through pathways of calmness into deep, restful sleep. Thought compression. Thought compression is a fascinating psychological technique designed to quiet an overactive mind by gradually shrinking troublesome thoughts until they become small, manageable, and eventually powerless. Most restless minds at bedtime are dominated by large, overwhelming ideas, worries, regrets, or concerns that appear huge, imposing, and impossible to control. By consciously compressing these expansive anxieties into progressively smaller forms, the mind gently regains authority over its own thoughts, creating space for tranquility and restful sleep. This method works by leveraging the mind's natural tendency to visualize its anxieties as larger-than-life events. When anxious or troubling thoughts appear, they often seem vast and expansive, monopolizing attention and intensifying stress. The mental imagery surrounding these thoughts grows exaggerated, transforming small concerns into massive, overwhelming problems. Thought compression subtly reverses this tendency. By deliberately visualizing thoughts becoming smaller, physically reducing them in the mind's eye, anxiety's emotional power gradually fades. Consider Maya, a graduate student who regularly struggles with nighttime anxiety about her upcoming thesis defense. Each evening, Maya lies awake, unable to sleep as her thoughts repeatedly magnify her worries, fears, and potential worst-case scenarios. Tonight, she decides to try thought compression as a calming mental exercise. Instead of fighting or attempting to silence her anxiety directly, Maya begins by visualizing her anxious thoughts clearly and vividly, recognizing their immense, overwhelming size in her imagination. At first, Maya sees her anxiety as a massive dark storm cloud looming heavily above her. She can feel its overwhelming presence, dense, expansive, and troubling. Then, gently and purposefully, she begins to visualize the cloud slowly shrinking, consciously compressing it, imagining it becoming smaller, lighter, and less intimidating. With each slow breath she takes, the storm cloud continues to reduce in size, steadily becoming smaller and smaller. Its dark, heavy presence weakens, turning lighter and less oppressive. As Maya continues compressing the storm cloud in her mind's eye, her emotional reaction shifts as well. Anxiety, which once felt overwhelmingly powerful, gradually loses its grip. The cloud eventually becomes tiny, fragile, no larger than a small cotton ball, gently floating above her hand. Its emotional weight disappears entirely. Maya then imagines softly blowing on this tiny cloud, watching it gently dissolve and vanish completely. The beauty of thought compression lies in its powerful simplicity. Anxiety thrives when the mind perceives worries as immense, complex, and impossible to control. When those same anxieties are gradually reduced in size through deliberate visualization, their emotional influence naturally weakens. The subconscious mind, recognizing this shift, reduces the intensity of anxiety's associated stress response, triggering the relaxation response instead. Breathing slows naturally, muscles release tension, and the mind easily shifts toward peaceful rest. Over time, practicing thought compression conditions the subconscious mind to automatically view anxious thoughts as smaller, less threatening, and entirely manageable. The habitual tendency to exaggerate worries naturally diminishes, replaced by a calm awareness that even troubling thoughts can easily become small and inconsequential. Tonight, if overwhelming thoughts prevent restful sleep, gently visualize anxiety as a large physical shape, cloud, or object. Allow yourself to clearly see and recognize its overwhelming size. Then softly begin compressing that image in your mind's eye, shrinking it deliberately, slowly, and steadily. Watch calmly as anxiety loses its strength, becoming smaller and lighter until it finally disappears. Feel the gentle relief of knowing that your mind holds the quiet power to compress worry into calm, peacefully guiding you toward deep, restful sleep. Ego Dissociation Drill. Ego Dissociation Drill is an intriguing psychological exercise that allows the restless mind to detach gently and completely from the overwhelming weight of personal worries, anxieties, and stresses. In the late hours, many minds become trapped in self-focused spirals, endlessly replaying perceived mistakes, anxieties about the future, or painful emotional experiences. This continuous cycle of personal worries prevents relaxation, making peaceful sleep nearly impossible. Ego Dissociation Drill offers a subtle yet profound solution, guiding the mind to temporarily step out of the personal identity and view itself neutrally from a peaceful, detached vantage point. At its core, Ego Dissociation Drill involves imagining oneself as an impartial observer of personal experiences rather than the participant directly experiencing them. Normally, the mind identifies strongly with the self, emotions, memories, fears, and desires. This strong identification creates tension and anxiety, reinforcing restless cycles that disrupt sleep. By deliberately visualizing oneself stepping out of this intense identification, the mind gently creates a neutral, peaceful space free from emotional tension and stress. Consider Daniel, who frequently struggles with sleepless nights due to relentless worry about a recent breakup. Each evening, Daniel's mind becomes trapped in emotional loops, replaying painful conversations, mistakes, and self-blame. Tonight, instead of continuing to fight this emotional turmoil, Daniel decides to practice the ego dissociation drill. He closes his eyes and quietly imagines himself rising above his body, gently floating upward toward the ceiling, observing his own restless self lying below. From this elevated viewpoint, Daniel neutrally observes the anxious thoughts, emotions, and memories drifting through the figure below. He sees himself clearly, yet impartially, noticing the tension in his body, the anxious expression on his face, and the troubled flow of thoughts. But he remains distant, calmly detached, and emotionally uninvolved. His emotional intensity fades naturally as he continues to observe himself as though watching a character in a film, understanding yet uninvolved, sympathetic yet free from identification. As Daniel continues this exercise, something remarkable occurs. Because he is no longer emotionally identified with the restless figure below, his anxious thoughts gradually lose their emotional impact. Observing neutrally, Daniel sees his anxieties simply as passing thoughts and temporary states, none of which truly define or control him. This subtle cognitive distancing allows his nervous system to release tension, naturally slowing his breathing and easing muscle tightness. Gradually, Daniel's restless self below begins to relax deeply, breathing peacefully, sinking gently towards sleep. Ego dissociation. Drill succeeds because anxiety depends heavily upon emotional identification. When thoughts feel personal and deeply meaningful, anxiety thrives, producing stress hormones and intensifying restlessness. However, by consciously visualizing oneself from a neutral, dissociated vantage point, the emotional grip loosens significantly. The subconscious mind becomes aware that troubling thoughts, worries, and emotions are simply temporary mental events, not permanent reflections of identity. Regular practice of ego dissociation drill can permanently alter the subconscious mind's response to anxiety. Over time, the mind naturally develops a quiet, calm perspective toward previously troubling thoughts. Stress and anxiety lessen, replaced by a peaceful acceptance that thoughts and emotions are temporary, neutral experiences rather than enduring personal definitions. Tonight, when anxieties or stresses attempt to dominate the mind, practice ego dissociation drill by softly visualizing yourself rising gently out of your body. Observe from above, neutrally and gently, free from personal identification. Witness anxiety gradually dissolve and tension fade naturally. Allow this peaceful detachment to softly guide you toward restful sleep, knowing that your mind holds the gentle power to step outside itself, free from anxiety's hold, into serenity and rest. Negative space visualization. Negative space visualization is an extraordinary psychological tactic that leverages a subtle aspect of human perception, the ability to see not only what's present, but also what isn't, to soothe restless minds. It operates by gently directing attention away from troubling thoughts themselves and onto the quiet spaces around and between them. This method transforms anxiety and stress from overpowering emotional experiences into mere shapes within a larger, peaceful mental landscape, inviting relaxation and restful sleep. Most restless minds focus intensely on anxious thoughts, emotions, or memories, magnifying their power and intensity. Each worry appears large and demanding, creating an overwhelming, crowded mental environment. Negative space visualization softly reverses this tendency. Instead of directly battling anxious thoughts, it gently draws awareness to the empty, calm spaces surrounding them. Anxiety thus loses its dominance, becoming smaller and less imposing within the larger mental environment. Consider Sophie, an architect who frequently finds herself sleeplessly replaying the day's tensions and conflicts. Her mind feels crowded with stressful conversations and looming deadlines, each anxiety seemingly more significant than the last. Tonight, however, Sophie tries negative space visualization as a calming technique. Instead of attempting to push away or silence these troubling thoughts directly, she visualizes her mind as if it were an intricate piece of artwork, perhaps a detailed charcoal drawing filled with anxious shapes and busy patterns. At first glance, Sophie's mental artwork appears overwhelmingly filled with anxiety, complex shapes, heavy lines, and crowded patterns, symbolizing her stressful thoughts. But as Sophie continues gently observing this internal imagery, she slowly shifts her attention away from the busy lines and patterns themselves. Instead, she consciously notices the quiet spaces of emptiness between and around them. Her awareness expands softly into these negative spaces, discovering areas of stillness she previously overlooked. As Sophie's mind becomes increasingly absorbed in these quiet, restful spaces, she notices a profound shift occurring within her. The anxious shapes, which once felt overwhelmingly significant, naturally shrink in importance. Their emotional intensity diminishes noticeably as she becomes more intrigued by the peaceful silence surrounding and containing them. The quiet negative spaces gradually dominate her attention, causing her breath to slow naturally, her muscles to relax gently, and her mind to drift toward calm. Negative space visualization works powerfully because anxiety relies heavily upon the attention and emotional energy given to troubling thoughts. When the mind intensely focuses on anxious content, worries appear large, meaningful, and overwhelming. By softly redirecting attention toward empty, peaceful spaces around these anxieties, emotional intensity is reduced, replaced by a gentle sense of tranquility. The subconscious mind quickly understands that anxiety is just one element within a larger, peaceful mental landscape. Thus, relaxation naturally occurs as attention expands beyond anxious thoughts, weakening anxiety's hold. Consistent practice of negative space visualization teaches the subconscious mind to automatically shift attention away from anxieties, directing it effortlessly toward quietness and calm. Anxiety eventually becomes just another neutral feature within the mental environment rather than a dominating emotional experience. Tonight, if restless thoughts and anxieties prevent peaceful sleep, gently imagine your mind as a detailed drawing filled with anxious shapes. Rather than resisting these shapes, quietly allow your awareness to expand into the empty, peaceful spaces between them. Notice anxiety becoming smaller, less emotionally charged, surrounded and soothed by calm stillness. Allow these quiet negative spaces to gently guide you into relaxation, softly drifting your restless mind toward restful sleep, embracing serenity in the silent gaps between thoughts. Memory echo suppression. Memory echo suppression is a remarkable psychological technique that allows a restless mind to softly quiet persistent, troubling memories, those echoes of past events or experiences that endlessly repeat themselves, stealing away peaceful sleep. Often, during moments of stillness, troubling memories resurface repeatedly, becoming louder and more emotionally charged with each replay. This continuous replaying amplifies stress, anxiety, and insomnia, but memory echo suppression gently and effectively silences these echoes, enabling restful sleep to emerge naturally. The mind's attachment to certain memories is powerful. Negative memories, especially those associated with embarrassment, regret, or emotional pain, possess a peculiar ability to persistently echo through consciousness, dominating attention and causing significant emotional distress. The mind continuously returns to these moments, magnifying their emotional weight and increasing tension. Memory echo. Suppression subtly reverses this pattern by training the subconscious mind to consciously weaken the emotional echoes attached to troubling memories. Consider Emma, who regularly struggles with sleep due to repeated memories of an embarrassing experience during a presentation at work. Each night, as soon as her head touches the pillow, the memory replays vividly, her voice trembling, audience members whispering, and with each replay, her anxiety grows stronger. Tonight, Emma decides to use memory echo suppression as a calming exercise. Emma begins by visualizing her memory clearly, yet neutrally, allowing herself to observe the moment objectively, without judgment or emotional attachment. Initially, she sees and hears the memory vividly, recognizing the emotional echo that intensifies her embarrassment. However, instead of resisting or trying to erase the memory, Emma softly and gently begins to suppress its emotional echo by deliberately fading its sensory details. She starts by mentally reducing the sound of voices in the memory, imagining them softly growing quieter, moving into the distance, and becoming indistinct whispers. Emma continues gently fading other sensory details as well, the brightness of the lights, the clarity of faces, gradually transforming the memory from a vivid, emotionally charged event into a neutral, blurred image devoid of clear sound, sight, or emotional content. As Emma continues suppressing these echoes, her mind begins experiencing relief. Without the intensity of sensory detail, the memory loses emotional power, becoming emotionally neutral and insignificant. Anxiety fades, tension dissolves naturally, and Emma's breath gradually slows. Her subconscious mind quietly accepts the memory as harmless background noise rather than an emotionally charged event. Without emotional engagement, the memory ceases its persistent echoing, allowing Emma's mind to move peacefully towards sleep. Memory echo. Suppression effectively works because memories derive their emotional intensity from detailed sensory associations. The clearer and louder these details are, the stronger their emotional power. By consciously suppressing sensory details, memory echoes become neutral, harmless, and emotionally insignificant. The subconscious mind quickly learns to automatically neutralize troubling memories, reducing their emotional intensity, frequency, and persistence. Regular practice of memory. Echo suppression permanently alters the subconscious mind's relationship with troubling memories. Over time, memories naturally surface less frequently, becoming neutral experiences instead of emotionally charged events. Anxiety fades permanently, replaced by peaceful mental acceptance. Tonight, if persistent memories replay endlessly and anxiety threatens peaceful sleep, softly visualize the troubling memory. Without resistance or judgment, gently suppress sensory echoes, fading sounds, images, and emotional content. Observe calmly as the memory transforms into neutral silence, its emotional grip naturally dissolving. Allow tranquility to softly replace anxiety, gently guiding your restless mind toward peaceful, restorative sleep, finally freed from memory's persistent echoes. Attention scattering. Attention scattering is a subtly powerful psychological technique designed to gently dismantle persistent anxious thought loops by dispersing the mind's focus across multiple, harmlessly neutral stimuli. Often, restless minds at night obsessively concentrate attention on one or two intense worries or anxieties, amplifying stress and blocking restful sleep. Attention scattering skillfully interrupts this obsessive mental focus, scattering awareness softly across numerous neutral points until anxiety naturally dissipates into gentle, restful neutrality. Anxiety thrives on the mind's focused, obsessive attention. Typically, when troubled by anxiety, attention becomes intensely concentrated upon a single thought or worry, magnifying its perceived importance and emotional intensity. Each replay of this anxious thought strengthens its power, trapping the mind within a restless cycle. Attention scattering quietly reverses this pattern. Rather than battling or silencing anxious thoughts directly, the technique deliberately disperses mental focus among multiple neutral thoughts or sensations, thus diminishing anxiety's strength naturally. Consider Ryan, who lies awake nightly due to persistent worries about his finances. His mind fixates obsessively, running through endless calculations, worst-case scenarios, and anxiety-producing images. Tonight, Ryan chooses to try attention scattering as a calming mental exercise. Instead of resisting or confronting his anxiety directly, Ryan begins intentionally shifting his attention gently across various neutral stimuli around him. Initially, Ryan softly notices the feeling of the sheets against his skin, carefully observing their subtle texture and temperature. Then, before anxiety can reassert itself, he deliberately shifts his awareness to other harmless sensations: the sound of distant traffic outside, the gentle ticking of a nearby clock, the faint glow of moonlight illuminating his room. Each time anxiety attempts to resurface, Ryan gently redirects his attention toward a different neutral sensation, continuously scattering his mental focus. As Ryan continues this gentle, deliberate shifting of attention, a subtle yet significant change occurs within his mind. Anxiety relies heavily upon the mind's focus, sustained attention. But when that attention becomes scattered and softly dispersed among neutral stimuli, anxious thoughts lose their fuel. Their emotional intensity weakens significantly, gradually fading into the background as quiet, harmless mental noise. Ryan notices a calming sensation as his breathing slows naturally and muscles relax gently, free from tension. Attention scattering succeeds because anxious thoughts depend entirely upon concentrated mental attention. Anxiety intensifies when attention remains fixed on worry, creating repetitive thought loops and emotional distress. However, by softly dispersing attention among multiple neutral points, anxiety loses coherence and emotional power. The subconscious mind perceives anxious thoughts as just one small stimulus among many, none particularly threatening or significant. Over time, regularly practicing attention scattering permanently alters subconscious thought patterns. Anxious thoughts naturally surface less frequently, becoming simply one harmless mental event among many, rather than a dominant emotional experience. Anxiety diminishes permanently, replaced by effortless mental calm. Tonight, if persistent anxiety threatens restful sleep, gently practice attention scattering. Quietly shift attention among various neutral sensations around you: textures, sounds, subtle movements, or sensations. Allow your mental focus to scatter softly across these harmless points, effortlessly dispersing anxious energy. Feel anxiety naturally lose its emotional grip, replaced by peaceful neutrality. Rest assured, knowing your mind holds the subtle yet powerful ability to disperse anxiety gently, softly, guiding your restless thoughts toward restful, rejuvenating sleep. False memory. Induction. False memory. Induction is a captivating and surprisingly powerful psychological technique used to gently calm restless minds and guide them toward peaceful sleep. The idea might sound mysterious, even a bit strange, but the core concept is actually quite simple. It involves intentionally creating subtle, neutral, yet completely imaginary memories to disrupt persistent anxious thought patterns. Anxiety often gains strength from replaying vivid, emotionally charged past experiences. By carefully introducing neutral false memories, the subconscious mind becomes momentarily intrigued, interrupting its fixation on stressful thoughts, which gradually leads to relaxation and deep sleep. The key to understanding this technique lies in realizing that the human mind is inherently suggestible. Memory itself is fluid, not fixed. Psychologists have shown repeatedly that memories can be easily reshaped, altered, or even subtly created through suggestion alone. False memory. Induction leverages this fascinating aspect of memory to gently distract the subconscious mind from anxiety, redirecting it softly toward neutral, calming imagery. Consider Natalie, who struggles nightly with insomnia caused by constant worry about a difficult relationship. Each night, she mentally revisits past arguments, emotional hurts, and worries about future confrontations, fueling her anxiety and restlessness. Tonight, Natalie decides to practice false memory induction. Rather than directly resisting or suppressing her anxious memories, Natalie deliberately and gently introduces a subtle, neutral, false memory into her mind. She calmly visualizes herself strolling through a peaceful, imaginary garden. She vividly imagines the gentle warmth of sunlight filtering through tree leaves, the subtle fragrance of blooming flowers, and the soft hum of bees drifting lazily through the air. Natalie visualizes this imaginary experience as if recalling an actual event from the recent past, quietly convincing her mind to accept it as real and familiar, despite its entirely fictional nature. As Natalie continues exploring and expanding this false memory, the subconscious part of her mind naturally becomes intrigued and quietly shifts attention away from anxious thought loops. Her brain instinctively tries to integrate this gentle, neutral experience into existing memory networks. Anxiety gradually loses power, replaced by the pleasant emotional neutrality of this imagined memory. Natalie's breathing naturally slows, her muscles soften, and she gently drifts toward deep sleep. False memory. Induction works powerfully because anxiety typically gains strength from replaying emotionally intense past experiences. The mind remains trapped in anxious loops, repeatedly recalling and reinforcing stressful memories. But by subtly introducing a neutral, imagined memory, attention shifts gently and temporarily toward harmless content. The subconscious mind quietly embraces this new, calm imagery, disrupting anxiety's emotional loops. The brain becomes momentarily occupied integrating this new experience, which gently reduces stress and calms emotional intensity. Over time, practicing false memory induction regularly teaches the subconscious mind to automatically shift away from anxiety-inducing memories, softly redirecting toward neutral, peaceful content instead. The frequency and intensity of anxious loops naturally diminish, permanently altering subconscious thought patterns. Anxiety becomes a less frequent visitor, replaced by a subtle yet reliable mental calmness. Tonight, if troubling memories or anxiety keep restful sleep distant, gently introduce false memory induction. Allow yourself to quietly visualize and mentally accept a neutral, pleasant, entirely imaginary memory. Observe as your subconscious mind gently engages with this new imagery, slowly dissolving anxiety's emotional hold. Feel calmness naturally emerge, knowing your mind now holds the gentle, quiet power to softly reshape memory, replacing anxiety with peaceful neutrality, guiding you effortlessly toward restful sleep. Silent counting reversal. Silent counting reversal is a deceptively simple psychological technique designed to gently interrupt and dissolve persistent anxious thought loops by subtly reversing the mind's natural numerical patterns. At night, when restlessness dominates, many minds instinctively attempt traditional counting techniques, often counting forward from one upwards to induce relaxation. Yet, anxiety often remains stubbornly attached as the predictability of counting forward fails to fully engage or distract the anxious mind. Silent counting reversal shifts the familiar pattern completely, creating a subtle cognitive twist that gently confuses and relaxes the subconscious, allowing sleep to naturally follow. Anxiety thrives upon predictable, repetitive mental patterns, especially at night. It eagerly anticipates the mind's familiar routines, worries replayed, fears magnified, stress amplified. Standard counting techniques, though well-intentioned, often become equally predictable and monotonous, allowing anxiety to quietly continue in the background. Silent counting reversal introduces a quiet yet intriguing disruption to these predictable mental patterns. By counting backwards silently from a higher number, such as 300, downwards, the mind gently shifts away from automatic thought loops, intrigued and absorbed by the unfamiliar counting pattern. Consider Olivia, who frequently struggles to sleep because her mind persistently revisits anxious thoughts about an important upcoming event. Each night, Olivia tries traditional counting methods, counting from 1 upwards in an attempt to distract her anxiety. Yet, she finds herself quickly bored, and her mind returns easily to anxious thoughts. Tonight, Olivia decides instead to practice silent counting reversal as a calming mental technique. Rather than counting upward, Olivia silently and gently begins counting backward from 300, softly visualizing each number clearly in her mind. Initially, the task feels easy, but after a short while, Olivia notices a subtle cognitive effort required to maintain the backward count. Her subconscious mind becomes quietly engaged, intrigued by this slightly unusual mental challenge. Anxiety naturally fades into the background, losing attention as her mind softly focuses on maintaining this reverse count. As Olivia continues silently counting backward, she feels a gradual yet noticeable shift occurring within her mind and body. Her breathing naturally becomes slower and deeper. Tension dissolves gently from her muscles, and a calming quietness replaces anxiety. Each descending number softly guides her mind further away from worries and toward restful neutrality. Before Olivia even realizes it, her mind peacefully drifts into a relaxed state, effortlessly transitioning into deep sleep. Silent counting reversal effectively works because anxiety depends upon repetitive, predictable thought patterns. By softly reversing familiar numerical patterns, this technique quietly disrupts anxious loops, intriguing the subconscious mind. Attention becomes gently absorbed in maintaining the reversed count, leaving no mental energy for anxiety to exploit. The subtle cognitive challenge naturally calms and relaxes the subconscious, creating ideal conditions for restful sleep. Regular practice of silent counting. Reversal permanently trains the subconscious mind to automatically interrupt anxiety's repetitive loops, easily shifting toward relaxation whenever anxiety emerges. Anxious thoughts naturally surface less frequently, replaced by calm neutrality and peace. Tonight, if restless thoughts or anxiety prevent peaceful sleep, softly practice silent counting reversal. Begin silently, counting backward from a higher number, calmly visualizing each descending number clearly. Feel anxiety gradually losing power as your subconscious mind becomes gently absorbed in this peaceful numerical reversal. Experience tranquility naturally replacing stress, gently guiding your restless mind into deep, restful sleep. Rest assured, knowing your mind holds the quiet yet powerful ability to softly reverse anxious patterns, effortlessly transitioning towards serenity, peace, and restful sleep. Thought Erasure Protocol. Thought Erasure Protocol is an intriguing psychological technique designed to softly dissolve persistent, troubling thoughts, gently guiding a restless mind toward deep, peaceful sleep. Unlike traditional methods of merely suppressing or ignoring unwanted thoughts, which often fail because of the mental resistance they create, this subtle yet powerful protocol quietly and deliberately guides the subconscious into visualizing anxious thoughts being smoothly and permanently erased, allowing relaxation and serenity to effortlessly take their place. Restless nights frequently occur because the mind fixates intensely upon particular thoughts, worries about mistakes, memories of difficult conversations, or fears of uncertain future events. Anxiety thrives when thoughts remain emotionally charged, persistent, and repetitive, trapping the mind in a restless, sleepless cycle. Thought Erasure Protocol gently interrupts these loops by visually and mentally guiding the subconscious into gently erasing troubling thoughts, softly reducing their emotional impact until they vanish completely from conscious awareness. To fully understand how Thought Erasure Protocol works, imagine Benjamin, who often lies awake at night repeatedly worrying about a recent argument with a friend. Each replay of this memory increases anxiety, tension, and restlessness, keeping sleep frustratingly out of reach. Tonight, Benjamin chooses to use the Thought Erasure Protocol to gently calm his restless mind. Benjamin first visualizes the troubling memory clearly, seeing it vividly displayed like a clear image or phrase written upon a whiteboard. Initially, the memory feels emotionally intense and difficult to look at, but Benjamin remains gently calm, allowing himself to observe it neutrally. He acknowledges the thought without resisting or suppressing it directly. Next, Benjamin softly and deliberately imagines picking up a gentle mental eraser, calmly wiping across the memory on the imagined board, slowly and smoothly removing the image or words entirely. As he continues gently erasing the thought, Benjamin notices its emotional intensity naturally decreasing. With each soft stroke of his imagined eraser, the memory becomes lighter, less clear, and more distant. Eventually, the memory fades entirely, leaving a clean, blank mental slate behind, free from emotional tension, anxiety, or restlessness. This quiet process creates a profound mental shift. Because the troubling thought is gently visualized as physically erased rather than forcefully resisted, suppressed, or challenged, Benjamin's subconscious mind quietly accepts this change. Anxiety associated with the memory gently and naturally dissipates, replaced by mental clarity, quietness, and tranquility. His breathing naturally deepens, his muscles relax effortlessly, and sleep gradually emerges, softly guiding Benjamin into restful calmness. Thought Erasure Protocol succeeds because anxiety and emotional intensity depend upon the clear, vivid imagery associated with particular thoughts. By softly and deliberately visualizing these thoughts being gently erased, emotional intensity weakens naturally. The subconscious mind quickly recognizes that thoughts treated in this neutral, detached manner are no longer threatening or emotionally meaningful, allowing anxiety to naturally fade. With repeated practice, Thought Erasure Protocol permanently conditions the subconscious mind to automatically erase troubling thoughts the moment they emerge. Anxiety becomes less frequent and intense, replaced naturally by peaceful neutrality and calm. Tonight, if troubling memories or persistent worries threaten restful sleep, softly visualize the troubling thought clearly as an image or words written clearly before you. Without emotional resistance, gently and deliberately erase this thought, slowly wiping it clean until it disappears entirely. Notice emotional tension quietly dissolving as the thought vanishes, replaced by peaceful, gentle clarity. Allow this quiet, calming protocol to softly guide your restless mind towards serenity, peacefulness, and deep, restorative sleep. Mental noise cancellation. Mental noise cancellation is a fascinating psychological tactic specifically designed to gently quiet the restless chatter and anxious thoughts that often overwhelm the mind, particularly in the quiet darkness of night. Similar to the soothing effect achieved by noise-canceling headphones, which produce subtle frequencies that effortlessly neutralize external noise, mental noise cancellation softly introduces gentle, neutral mental frequencies to counteract internal anxiety. The result is a peaceful, quiet mind, perfectly primed for restful sleep. At the heart of mental noise cancellation is the recognition that anxiety, worry, and restless thoughts create internal noise, constantly interrupting tranquility and calm. This internal noise thrives on emotional engagement and repetitive mental loops. Each anxious thought or memory repeats continuously, growing louder and more intense, disrupting peace and blocking restful sleep. Mental noise cancellation interrupts this cycle softly yet effectively, introducing neutral, calming mental frequencies that quietly neutralize anxiety's persistent chatter. To illustrate how mental noise cancellation works in practice, consider Jonathan, who frequently struggles with insomnia caused by intense anxiety about his job performance. Every night, his mind fills with loud, intrusive thoughts, self-criticism, imagined negative outcomes, persistent worries about mistakes. These anxious thoughts endlessly replay, trapping Jonathan's mind in a noisy cycle of anxiety, tension, and restlessness. Tonight, Jonathan decides to practice mental noise cancellation to quiet his restless mind. Jonathan begins by acknowledging the internal noise, softly observing the anxious thoughts without emotional reaction. He notices the volume and intensity of the mental chatter, recognizing that each anxious thought creates internal noise and emotional distress. Rather than directly confronting or resisting these anxious thoughts, Jonathan quietly introduces a gentle, neutral mental frequency to softly neutralize anxiety's noise. He calmly visualizes this mental frequency as a soft, soothing hum, like the gentle sound of distant waves or a quiet, consistent whisper of wind through trees. This subtle mental frequency has no emotional meaning or intensity. It is simply a soft, gentle sound imagined clearly and deliberately. Jonathan quietly allows this soothing mental frequency to gradually increase in his awareness, calmly filling his mind, softly neutralizing anxiety's noise. As Jonathan continues this quiet visualization, something remarkable occurs. Anxiety's loud, intrusive thoughts gradually lose power, drowned out by the gentle, calming frequency. Emotional intensity weakens naturally, and anxious mental loops dissolve quietly, replaced by peacefulness and relaxation. Jonathan's breathing naturally slows, his muscles relax, and his mind becomes gently quiet, free from restless noise. Mental noise cancellation effectively works because anxiety relies heavily upon internal emotional noise and repetitive thoughts. By gently introducing neutral, calming frequencies, anxiety's noise becomes softly neutralized, replaced by a quiet mental environment. The subconscious mind quickly learns that anxious thoughts lose emotional significance when neutralized by calming mental frequencies, automatically reducing future anxious loops and intensities. Over time, consistent use of mental noise cancellation permanently alters subconscious mental patterns. Anxiety naturally diminishes, becoming simply one neutral sound among many, easily neutralized by calming mental frequencies. Restful tranquility becomes the default mental state, effortlessly accessible even during previously anxious moments. Tonight, if anxious thoughts or restless mental chatter disrupt peaceful sleep, gently practice mental noise cancellation. Softly acknowledge anxiety's internal noise without emotional engagement. Then, quietly visualize introducing a neutral, soothing mental frequency, like distant waves or gentle wind, to softly neutralize anxiety's chatter. Feel anxious thoughts gently losing their emotional grip, replaced effortlessly by quietness, serenity, and relaxation. Rest assured, knowing your mind holds the subtle yet powerful ability to softly neutralize internal noise, gently guiding your restless thoughts toward tranquility, peace, and deep, restful sleep. Psychic anchor release. Psychic anchor release is an extraordinary psychological technique designed to gently free the restless mind from hidden emotional attachments, those subtle yet powerful anchors rooted deeply in past experiences, anxieties, or unresolved feelings. Often unnoticed yet profoundly influential, these emotional anchors invisibly weigh down the mind, trapping it in loops of worry, stress, and insomnia. Psychic anchor release gently identifies and quietly dissolves these emotional ties, allowing the subconscious mind to drift freely and effortlessly toward peaceful sleep. To understand how psychic anchor release works, consider the mind as a boat gently floating upon calm waters. Beneath its surface, however, unseen anchors tether it to anxiety, regrets, and unresolved emotions. These anchors hold the mind back, silently preventing it from moving naturally toward tranquility. Psychic anchor release involves consciously visualizing these hidden anchors clearly, softly acknowledging their presence without resistance, and then gently imagining them releasing, freeing the subconscious to float peacefully and naturally toward restful calmness. Imagine Laura, who frequently struggles with restless nights due to anxiety about her strained relationship with her family. Each night, Laura lies awake, her mind repeatedly returning to emotional memories, arguments, regrets, and unresolved feelings. Each anxious thought loops endlessly, intensifying anxiety, tension, and sleeplessness. Tonight, Laura decides to practice psychic anchor release as a calming mental exercise. Laura first visualizes her mind as a serene boat softly drifting on a calm, gentle sea. Initially, the waters appear peaceful, but as Laura quietly observes, she gently notices subtle anchors beneath the surface, each representing her anxieties and unresolved feelings. Laura calmly acknowledges these anchors without emotional judgment or resistance, simply recognizing their quiet presence. Next, Laura softly visualizes gently releasing these psychic anchors one by one, calmly imagining herself loosening their hold, allowing them to slowly sink away from her mental awareness. With each anchor softly released, Laura's boat naturally rises, floating higher and more freely upon the peaceful waters. Emotional tension gradually fades away, replaced effortlessly by quiet tranquility. As Laura continues gently releasing each psychic anchor, she feels a subtle yet profound mental shift occurring. Anxiety and unresolved emotions quietly dissolve, losing their previously hidden power over her subconscious. Her breathing naturally slows and deepens, muscle tension releases gently, and sleep softly emerges, guiding Laura toward effortless relaxation and rest. Psychic anchor release succeeds powerfully because anxiety and emotional distress often stem from hidden, unresolved emotional attachments, anchors quietly holding the subconscious mind in loops of tension and stress. When these emotional ties remain unnoticed, they exert powerful influence beneath conscious awareness. By softly visualizing and gently releasing each psychic anchor, their emotional influence naturally fades. Anxiety dissolves effortlessly, replaced by mental clarity, peace, and tranquility. Regular practice of psychic anchor release permanently alters subconscious thought patterns. Anxieties and emotional attachments naturally surface less frequently and with reduced intensity. The mind automatically recognizes hidden psychic anchors, gently releasing them whenever they emerge, effortlessly maintaining mental calmness and tranquility. Tonight, if hidden anxieties or emotional attachments threaten restful sleep, gently practice psychic anchor release. Quietly visualize your mind as a calm boat, softly drifting upon peaceful waters. Softly acknowledge hidden emotional anchors, calmly observing their presence without resistance. Gently visualize releasing each anchor, softly allowing them to dissolve quietly beneath the surface, freeing your subconscious mind to float peacefully, effortlessly, and naturally toward restful sleep. Feel tranquility, gently replacing anxiety, knowing your mind now holds the subtle yet profound power to quietly release emotional attachments, guiding your restless thoughts effortlessly towards serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Cognitive peripheral vision. Cognitive peripheral vision is a subtle yet deeply effective psychological technique specifically designed to gently quiet the restless, anxious mind by shifting attention from an intense central focus toward a calm and neutral peripheral awareness. At night, Many minds become trapped in anxious loops precisely because they remain rigidly focused on a single worry or stressful thought. Anxiety thrives in this narrow field of mental vision, intensifying stress and blocking peaceful sleep. Cognitive peripheral vision skillfully interrupts this obsessive focus, guiding the mind gently outward into the peaceful, neutral periphery, softening anxiety's grip and naturally creating a calm, restful state. The human mind, much like the human eye, tends to focus intensely on central points of attention. Anxiety exploits this natural tendency, narrowing attention sharply onto worries, fears, and imagined threats, creating persistent thought loops. Cognitive peripheral vision softly reverses this tendency by encouraging the mind to shift gently toward the neutral periphery of awareness, the quiet spaces that surround anxious thoughts without engaging them directly. Consider Aaron, who regularly finds himself unable to sleep because of obsessive worries about an upcoming presentation at work. Each night, Aaron's mind fixates intensely upon the stress of possible failure, his attention narrowly and obsessively locked onto anxious thoughts and mental imagery. Tonight, Aaron decides to practice cognitive peripheral vision as a calming mental exercise. Instead of confronting or directly resisting his anxiety, Aaron gently acknowledges the anxious thought clearly in his mental center of attention. Rather than continuing to stare directly at it, he softly expands his awareness outward toward the mental periphery. He deliberately becomes aware of neutral sensations around and beyond this anxious focus, quiet sounds in his room, the gentle feeling of sheets against his skin, the peaceful rhythm of his breathing. As Aaron gently maintains this expanded peripheral awareness, he notices a subtle yet powerful shift occurring. His anxiety, once central and overwhelming, gradually loses its intensity, gently fading into the quiet background. Because his mind is softly directed outward toward neutral, calm sensations, anxiety loses the emotional fuel it relies upon. Intense, concentrated attention. Aaron's breath naturally deepens, his muscles relax effortlessly, and his mind gently moves toward a peaceful state of neutrality and rest. Cognitive peripheral vision effectively works because anxiety depends upon intense, narrow mental focus. When attention is rigidly locked onto anxious thoughts, the subconscious mind continuously magnifies emotional distress, causing restlessness and sleeplessness. By softly shifting attention outward toward the quiet periphery, anxiety's emotional intensity naturally diminishes. The subconscious mind recognizes anxious thoughts as just one small stimulus among many, easily fading into neutral mental noise. Regular practice of cognitive peripheral vision permanently retrains the subconscious mind, reducing anxiety's frequency and emotional intensity. The mind learns to automatically shift attention softly outward whenever anxiety emerges, effortlessly maintaining mental peace and calmness even during previously stressful situations. Tonight, if anxious thoughts or obsessive worries threaten restful sleep, gently practice cognitive peripheral vision. Calmly acknowledge your anxious thought clearly, without resistance or judgment. Then, softly expand your awareness outward, gently noticing quiet, neutral sensations in the mental periphery, subtle sounds, sensations, or the rhythm of your breath. Allow anxiety to naturally lose intensity, quietly fading into peaceful background awareness. Feel your mind gently shifting toward neutrality, softly guiding your restless thoughts into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, knowing your mind holds the gentle yet powerful ability to softly shift outward, dissolving anxiety effortlessly and creating perfect conditions for tranquility, relaxation, and restful sleep. Inner dialogue, scrambling. Inner dialogue scrambling is an intriguing and quietly powerful psychological technique that gently disrupts repetitive anxious thoughts, effectively breaking the restless mental loops that prevent peaceful sleep. The technique's strength lies in its subtle ability to deliberately and softly distort the inner narrative, the constant, often critical or anxious voice that runs persistently in the background of consciousness. By gently scrambling this internal dialogue, the mind becomes quietly disengaged from anxious thoughts, naturally dissolving their emotional power and guiding the subconscious toward restful tranquility. At night, restless minds frequently become trapped by repetitive internal dialogues, worries replayed, scenarios imagined, regrets revisited. This inner narrative feels automatic, powerful, and emotionally charged. Anxiety thrives when these internal scripts remain intact and emotionally intense. Inner dialogue. Scrambling skillfully interrupts this repetitive narrative, softly disrupting the coherence of anxious thoughts until they gently lose emotional significance and fade naturally into the subconscious background. Consider Jessica, who frequently struggles to sleep because of persistent internal dialogue about her recent job interview. Each night, Jessica's mind replays the anxious narrative repeatedly, criticizing her performance, worrying about the outcome, and imagining negative scenarios. Anxiety intensifies each repetition, preventing sleep and causing significant emotional distress. Tonight, Jessica decides to use inner dialogue scrambling as a calming mental exercise. Jessica begins by softly noticing the anxious inner dialogue clearly, without emotional resistance. Instead of confronting or suppressing this mental script directly, she quietly introduces gentle disruptions to its coherence. She softly imagines altering individual words, rearranging sentences, and subtly distorting the internal dialogue, deliberately creating nonsensical phrases and strange sequences of thought. As Jessica gently continues scrambling her anxious internal dialogue, something remarkable occurs. The emotional intensity associated with her anxious thoughts gradually diminishes. The mind instinctively seeks meaningful coherence in its internal narratives, yet these scrambled sentences now appear absurd and harmless, losing their emotional significance. Jessica feels tension gently dissolving, replaced by peaceful neutrality and calmness. Her breathing naturally deepens, muscles relax effortlessly, and sleep softly emerges, effortlessly guiding her restless mind toward restful tranquility. Inner dialogue. Scrambling works effectively because anxious thoughts derive their emotional intensity from coherent internal narratives. Anxiety relies upon the subconscious mind's continuous replaying of coherent, emotionally charged scripts. By gently disrupting the coherence of these internal dialogues, their emotional power diminishes naturally. The subconscious mind quickly perceives these scrambled narratives as harmless, irrelevant, and unworthy of emotional engagement, allowing anxiety to quietly dissipate. Regular practice of inner dialogue. Scrambling permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically dissolving anxiety's emotional intensity whenever anxious narratives emerge. Restlessness and emotional distress naturally diminish, replaced by mental neutrality, peace, and calm. Tonight, if repetitive anxious thoughts threaten restful sleep, gently practice inner dialogue. Scrambling. Softly observe your anxious inner dialogue without emotional reaction. Calmly introduce gentle disruptions, alter individual words, rearrange sentences, softly distort meaning into gentle absurdity. Allow anxiety to quietly lose its emotional grip, fading naturally into neutral, mental background noise. Feel tranquility softly replacing emotional tension, knowing your mind holds the gentle yet powerful ability to softly scramble anxious thoughts, effortlessly guiding you into restful, serene sleep. Rest assured, knowing your subconscious mind now gently dissolves anxiety whenever it appears, automatically creating conditions of calmness, relaxation, and deep, rejuvenating sleep. Identity fragmentation. Identity fragmentation is an unusual yet deeply calming psychological method designed to gently ease the restless mind into tranquility and peaceful sleep. At first glance, the term itself may sound unsettling, even a bit mysterious, but beneath its intriguing name lies a powerful mental strategy that softly disrupts anxiety by momentarily dissolving the rigid self-concept, the fixed sense of identity that often traps people in cycles of worry, fear, and insomnia. Through carefully visualized fragmentation of identity into smaller, neutral aspects, the mind naturally releases emotional tension, allowing a quiet peace to effortlessly settle in. To fully understand how identity fragmentation works, it's helpful to recognize that anxiety often grows from an overly rigid and intense identification with certain roles, experiences, or personal characteristics. For example, someone who deeply identifies with their professional role may feel intense anxiety about work-related failures. Anxiety thrives because this rigid sense of identity becomes personally threatened or emotionally engaged. Identity fragmentation gently reverses this pattern by temporarily visualizing identity as multiple, neutral fragments, softly dissolving anxiety's emotional power. Consider Marcus, who frequently lies awake at night, troubled by anxiety about his job as a doctor. Marcus strongly identifies himself through his professional role, viewing every decision, success, or failure as deeply personal and significant. Anxiety grows nightly as Marcus replays worries about medical mistakes, patient outcomes, or professional reputation. Tonight, Marcus decides to use identity fragmentation as a calming mental exercise. Marcus begins by calmly visualizing his identity clearly, recognizing the tightly unified sense of self he maintains. Rather than resisting or confronting his anxieties directly, Marcus gently imagines softly breaking his identity into smaller, neutral fragments. He calmly visualizes aspects of his identity as a doctor, friend, husband, and even smaller roles or characteristics, his hobbies, interests, preferences, floating gently and independently, detached and separate from each other. As Marcus continues softly visualizing these neutral fragments drifting quietly apart, a subtle yet powerful mental shift occurs. His tightly unified identity, which once intensified anxiety, now softly dissolves into harmless neutrality. Each fragment no longer feels emotionally significant or personally threatened. Instead, they float gently and peacefully, quietly detached and free from emotional tension. Anxiety softly loses its fuel, replaced effortlessly by mental neutrality and calmness. Marcus continues gently observing these fragments, floating peacefully, feeling anxiety gradually dissolve into restful quietness. His breathing naturally slows and deepens, his muscles gently relax, and sleep softly emerges, effortlessly guiding Marcus into tranquility and peace. Identity fragmentation succeeds because anxiety relies heavily upon the mind's rigid sense of identity. Anxiety intensifies when thoughts or worries become personally threatening, magnified by emotional identification. By gently dissolving identity into neutral fragments, emotional intensity naturally dissipates. The subconscious mind quickly perceives identity as flexible and neutral rather than rigid and personally threatened, quietly reducing anxiety's power and intensity. Regular practice of identity fragmentation permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically dissolving anxiety whenever personal identification becomes rigid or intense. Anxiety naturally diminishes, replaced effortlessly by calm neutrality and peaceful mental clarity. Tonight, if anxiety or worries threaten restful sleep, gently practice identity fragmentation. Calmly visualize your identity clearly, softly recognizing the roles, characteristics, or experiences you strongly identify with. Without resistance or judgment, gently fragment this identity into smaller, neutral aspects, quietly observing them float independently, detached and peaceful. Feel anxiety gently losing its emotional grip, replaced effortlessly by quiet neutrality and calmness. Allow tranquility to softly guide your mind toward restful, serene sleep, knowing your subconscious now effortlessly dissolves anxiety whenever it emerges. Rest peacefully, assured that your mind holds the quiet yet powerful ability to softly fragment rigid identity, gently guiding restless thoughts toward effortless tranquility, peace, and rejuvenating sleep. Mental frequency shift. Mental frequency shift is an elegant psychological method specifically designed to gently redirect a restless mind away from anxious, repetitive thought loops, softly guiding it toward a state of deep tranquility and restful sleep. Anxiety, restlessness, and insomnia often occur because the mind becomes fixated on stressful mental frequencies, repetitive, emotionally charged thoughts vibrating with tension and worry. By quietly shifting these mental frequencies toward neutral, calming rhythms, anxiety naturally dissolves, replaced effortlessly by mental peace and serenity. To understand mental frequency shift fully, it helps to recognize that thoughts and emotions often behave similarly to frequencies or waves, continuously echoing in the subconscious mind. Anxious thoughts resonate at high, tense frequencies, amplifying emotional stress and mental restlessness. These high-frequency thoughts perpetuate anxiety, trapping the mind in continuous loops. Mental frequency shift gently interrupts these loops by deliberately and softly shifting mental attention towards slower, peaceful frequencies, effortlessly neutralizing anxiety's emotional grip. Imagine Lucas, who regularly struggles with insomnia caused by repetitive anxious thoughts about financial uncertainty. Each night, Lucas's mind becomes trapped in high-frequency worry loops, repeatedly imagining stressful scenarios and negative outcomes. Tonight, Lucas decides to practice mental frequency shift as a calming mental exercise. Lucas begins by calmly acknowledging the anxious frequency clearly, recognizing the fast-paced, repetitive mental rhythm of his worries without emotional resistance or judgment. Instead of confronting or resisting anxiety directly, Lucas quietly visualizes gently shifting the mental frequency downward, imagining his thoughts softly transitioning from rapid, tense vibrations towards slower, peaceful rhythms. He gently visualizes his anxious thoughts as small waves rippling quickly across the surface of a pond. Slowly, Lucas softly imagines these waves gradually calming, their frequency quietly lowering, becoming smoother, slower, and more peaceful. With each gentle mental shift, anxiety softly dissolves, losing its emotional intensity and becoming harmlessly neutral. As Lucas continues this soft visualization, he feels a profound yet subtle mental shift occurring. His breathing naturally slows and deepens, muscle tension releases effortlessly, and sleep softly emerges, gently guiding Lucas into peaceful tranquility. His restless thoughts effortlessly quiet as mental frequencies shift toward calmness and neutrality. Mental frequency shift succeeds effectively because anxious thoughts gain their emotional power from rapid, repetitive mental frequencies. Anxiety's emotional grip naturally weakens when these frequencies shift towards slower, peaceful rhythms. The subconscious mind instinctively perceives slower mental frequencies as safe, calm, and relaxing, allowing anxiety to naturally dissolve. Regular practice of mental frequency shift permanently conditions the subconscious mind to automatically shift anxious frequencies whenever they emerge. Anxiety's emotional intensity and frequency naturally diminish, replaced effortlessly by calmness, neutrality, and mental tranquility. Tonight, if repetitive anxious thoughts threaten restful sleep, gently practice mental frequency shift. Calmly observe anxiety's mental frequency clearly, without resistance or emotional judgment. Softly visualize these anxious thoughts as waves gently rippling across a pond, quietly imagining their rhythm slowing and calming. Allow anxiety's emotional grip to dissolve gently, effortlessly replaced by peaceful neutrality. Feel tranquility softly guiding your restless mind toward deep, rejuvenating sleep, assured that your subconscious mind now effortlessly shifts anxious frequencies whenever they arise. Rest peacefully, knowing your mind holds the gentle yet powerful ability to softly shift mental frequencies, effortlessly transitioning towards serenity, relaxation, and restful sleep. Future self-hypnosis. Future self-hypnosis is an extraordinary psychological tactic designed to softly guide a restless mind from anxiety-filled loops toward calmness and restful sleep. Unlike traditional relaxation methods that focus on past or present moments, future self-hypnosis gently draws the subconscious mind toward a peaceful, positive future version of oneself. By quietly visualizing and softly embodying this calm, future state, anxiety naturally dissolves, effortlessly replaced by tranquility and restfulness. The intriguing power of future self-hypnosis lies in the subconscious mind's natural tendency to emotionally resonate with imagined future scenarios. Anxiety frequently arises from repetitive loops of past regrets or future fears, persistently replaying negative imagined scenarios that create emotional tension and sleeplessness. Future self-hypnosis subtly reverses this pattern. Instead of anxiety-ridden future imaginings, it softly encourages visualization of a calm, peaceful future self, free from anxiety, confident, and relaxed. Consider Jenna, who struggles nightly with anxiety about her uncertain career path. Each night, Jenna's mind repeatedly imagines stressful future scenarios, failure, disappointment, regret. Anxiety grows stronger with each anxious replay, keeping Jenna restless and sleepless. Tonight, Jenna chooses to practice future self-hypnosis as a calming mental exercise. Jenna begins by softly visualizing herself gently drifting forward in time, quietly imagining a peaceful, serene future version of herself. She gently sees herself calmly working in a rewarding, fulfilling job, quietly confident and free from anxiety. Jenna observes subtle details, her relaxed posture, peaceful expression, effortless confidence. As Jenna continues this gentle visualization, her subconscious mind naturally resonates emotionally with this peaceful future scenario. Next, Jenna softly begins embodying this calm, future self, quietly imagining herself stepping gently into this tranquil future state. Jenna softly feels this peacefulness, quietly noticing how this future version of herself breathes slowly, deeply, naturally calm. She gently embodies this future tranquility, softly feeling its calming influence quietly spreading throughout her mind and body. As Jenna continues this quiet visualization and gentle embodiment, a subtle yet powerful mental shift naturally occurs. Anxiety, previously intense and overwhelming, effortlessly dissolves, gently replaced by tranquility, neutrality, and calmness. Her breathing naturally slows and deepens, muscles relax effortlessly, and sleep softly emerges, gently guiding Jenna into peaceful restfulness. Future self-hypnosis succeeds powerfully because anxiety depends heavily upon emotional resonance with imagined future scenarios. When imagined futures are stressful and negative, anxiety naturally intensifies. By softly imagining and gently embodying calm, positive future scenarios, the subconscious mind effortlessly resonates with tranquility instead, naturally dissolving anxiety's emotional grip. Regular practice of future self-hypnosis permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically replacing anxious future imaginings with calm, neutral, positive scenarios. Anxiety naturally diminishes, replaced effortlessly by peacefulness, tranquility, and mental calm. Tonight, if restless anxiety threatens peaceful sleep, gently practice future self-hypnosis. Softly visualize yourself quietly drifting forward into a serene, peaceful future. Calmly observe subtle details of this tranquil future self, gently embodying this peaceful state. Allow tranquility to softly resonate throughout your subconscious mind, effortlessly dissolving anxiety. Feel peace gently guiding your restless mind toward deep, restful sleep. Assured, your subconscious mind now automatically resonates with calm future scenarios. Rest peacefully, knowing your mind holds the gentle yet powerful ability to softly embody tranquil future states, effortlessly transitioning towards serenity, relaxation, and rejuvenating sleep. Infinite regression exercise. Infinite regression exercise is an intriguing psychological tactic designed to gently dissolve anxious thought loops and softly guide a restless mind toward deep tranquility and restful sleep. Anxiety often gains its strength from repetitive thoughts focused on past mistakes, regrets, or imagined future scenarios. These anxious loops endlessly replay, amplifying emotional tension and insomnia. Infinite regression exercise quietly disrupts these loops by gently engaging the subconscious mind in an endless yet neutral series of mental reflections. An infinite regression that softly dissolves anxiety's emotional grip, naturally creating conditions of calmness and peace. At its core, the infinite regression exercise leverages the mind's fascination with reflective thought, thinking about thinking itself. Anxiety typically focuses intensely on specific thoughts or memories, deeply engaging emotional responses. Infinite regression exercise softly redirects this intense focus, guiding the mind gently into a neutral, endless sequence of reflections. Each thought quietly leads to another, then another, infinitely regressing into harmless neutrality, dissolving anxiety's emotional intensity along the way. Consider Ethan, who frequently struggles to sleep because of anxious thoughts about mistakes he made during a recent presentation. Every night, Ethan's mind replays these mistakes obsessively, each anxious loop increasing stress, tension, and restlessness. Tonight, Ethan decides to practice infinite regression exercise as a calming mental technique. Ethan begins by softly acknowledging his anxious thought clearly, without resistance or emotional judgment. Instead of engaging emotionally or confronting anxiety directly, Ethan gently asks himself a quiet, neutral, reflective question. Who is it that is having this anxious thought? Calmly observing himself asking this question, Ethan then quietly reflects upon the answer, softly responding internally, I am the one observing myself having the anxious thought. Next, Ethan gently reflects even deeper, softly asking another quiet, reflective question. Who is it that observes the observer having the anxious thought? Ethan calmly continues, reflecting upon these quiet internal questions, softly engaging his subconscious mind into infinite regression, quietly observing the observer, then observing the observer of the observer, gently and endlessly reflecting inward. As Ethan continues softly engaging his subconscious mind in this quiet, infinite regression, a remarkable mental shift naturally occurs. Anxiety's emotional intensity gradually weakens, gently dissolving into neutral mental background noise. Because his mind is softly occupied with quiet, neutral reflections rather than anxious emotional engagement, tension naturally fades, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and calmness. Ethan's breathing gently slows and deepens, muscles relax naturally, and sleep softly emerges, guiding his restless mind gently toward deep restfulness. Infinite regression. Exercise succeeds powerfully because anxiety thrives upon emotional engagement and repetitive thought loops. When the mind remains trapped in anxious loops, emotional tension intensifies, causing sleeplessness and restlessness. By softly redirecting attention into quiet, neutral, endless reflections, observing thoughts, observing themselves, the subconscious mind gently disengages from emotional anxiety. Anxious thoughts quietly dissolve into neutral mental noise, effortlessly replaced by peacefulness and calmness. Regular practice of infinite regression. Exercise permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically dissolving anxiety's emotional power whenever anxious thoughts emerge. Anxiety's emotional intensity and frequency naturally diminish, replaced effortlessly by calm neutrality and peaceful mental clarity. Tonight, if persistent anxiety or restless thoughts threaten restful sleep, gently practice infinite regression exercise. Quietly acknowledge your anxious thought clearly, without emotional resistance or judgment. Softly ask yourself neutral reflective questions, calmly observing who is experiencing anxiety, then gently reflecting upon the observer, softly continuing this infinite regression inward. Allow tranquility to naturally replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest assured, knowing your subconscious mind now effortlessly dissolves anxiety whenever it emerges, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Subconscious password reset. Subconscious password reset is a remarkably unique psychological method designed to gently disengage the restless mind from anxiety, allowing it to softly transition into deep, restful sleep. At first, the concept may seem mysterious, even a little strange, but its power lies precisely in its subtlety and intrigue. Anxiety frequently traps the mind in repetitive thought loops, endlessly replaying stressful scenarios, regrets, or worries. Subconscious password reset quietly interrupts these loops by gently reframing anxious thoughts as outdated passwords the subconscious mind has mistakenly held onto, softly guiding the mind toward creating and accepting new, calming mental passwords instead. The subconscious mind functions much like a secure vault, quietly holding on to deep-seated beliefs, thought patterns, and emotional responses that shape daily experiences. Anxiety often arises when the subconscious repeatedly uses outdated emotional passwords, negative thoughts, or self-beliefs to unlock and replay anxious experiences. Subconscious password reset softly reframes these anxious patterns, gently guiding the subconscious toward resetting these outdated passwords, replacing them quietly with new, calming mental phrases or thoughts. Consider Emily, who struggles nightly with insomnia caused by anxiety about her self-worth and capabilities at work. Each night, Emily's subconscious repeatedly uses the same outdated mental passwords, negative phrases like "I'm not good enough" or "I always mess things up," to unlock and replay anxious emotional experiences, intensifying restlessness and anxiety. Tonight, Emily decides to practice subconscious password reset as a calming mental exercise. Emily begins by softly acknowledging the negative mental password clearly, observing it gently, without emotional judgment. Instead of resisting or confronting it directly, Emily quietly visualizes this anxious thought as simply an outdated password, one her subconscious mistakenly repeats out of habit. Emily softly imagines calmly deleting this outdated password, quietly visualizing herself gently typing it into an imaginary mental interface and softly pressing delete, calmly feeling this negative belief quietly dissolve and fade. Next, Emily gently visualizes creating a new, calming mental password, quietly choosing a positive, neutral phrase such as, "I am calm and capable," softly entering this new password clearly into her subconscious mind's imagined interface. Emily gently imagines her subconscious softly accepting and securely storing this new positive password, quietly replacing anxiety's previous emotional influence. As Emily continues this quiet visualization, she notices a profound yet gentle mental shift occurring. Anxiety's emotional intensity gradually weakens, gently dissolving into neutral mental background noise. Her subconscious mind quietly accepts this new calming password, softly disengaging from repetitive anxious loops. Emily's breathing gently slows, muscles naturally relax, and sleep softly emerges, gently guiding her restless mind toward peaceful restfulness. Subconscious password. Reset succeeds powerfully because anxiety often originates from deep subconscious beliefs and patterns, the negative passwords repeatedly used to unlock emotional distress. By gently reframing anxious thoughts as outdated passwords, the subconscious mind softly disengages from emotional intensity, quietly replacing anxiety with calm neutrality. The subconscious instinctively embraces new positive passwords, naturally reducing anxiety's frequency and emotional power. Regular practice of subconscious password. Reset permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically replacing anxious mental passwords whenever they emerge. Anxiety's emotional intensity naturally diminishes, replaced effortlessly by peaceful neutrality and mental tranquility. Tonight, if anxious thoughts or restlessness threaten peaceful sleep, gently practice subconscious password reset. Softly acknowledge your anxious thought clearly, visualizing it gently as an outdated subconscious password. Calmly imagine deleting this outdated password, quietly dissolving anxiety's emotional intensity. Softly introduce a new calming mental password, gently feeling your subconscious mind quietly accepting and securely storing this new positive belief. Allow tranquility to softly guide your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, knowing your subconscious mind now effortlessly replaces anxiety's outdated patterns with calming mental passwords, automatically creating perfect conditions of relaxation, serenity, and restful sleep. Emotional desaturation. Emotional desaturation is a quietly powerful psychological method specifically designed to gently neutralize overwhelming emotional responses, effortlessly guiding the restless mind toward deep, restorative sleep. Anxiety and stress often become amplified at night because the mind vividly replays emotionally intense memories, fears, or imagined scenarios. These emotionally saturated images dominate consciousness, intensifying restlessness and insomnia. Emotional desaturation softly interrupts this pattern by gently visualizing anxious thoughts in gradually diminishing color and vividness, quietly dissolving their emotional intensity and guiding the subconscious mind toward calm neutrality. To fully understand emotional desaturation, consider that emotional intensity within the mind often correlates directly with the vividness and colorfulness of mental imagery. Anxiety thrives upon bright, emotionally saturated images, vivid memories of embarrassment, failure, or imagined future worries that persistently replay within the subconscious mind. Emotional desaturation subtly reverses this tendency by gently visualizing anxious mental images, gradually losing color, softly shifting toward neutrality and peacefulness. Consider Emma, who frequently struggles nightly with anxiety about social interactions at work. Each evening, Emma vividly replays emotionally intense memories, awkward conversations, embarrassing moments, and imagined judgments from colleagues. These emotionally saturated thoughts amplify anxiety, tension, and sleeplessness. Tonight, Emma chooses to practice emotional desaturation as a calming mental exercise. Emma begins by softly acknowledging the vivid anxious image clearly, observing its bright colors and intense emotional quality without resistance or judgment. Instead of confronting anxiety directly, Emma gently visualizes this emotionally charged mental image softly beginning to lose color and brightness, quietly becoming progressively muted, faded, and neutral. She gently imagines the anxious memory as a brightly colored photograph, softly visualizing its vivid hues quietly fading, bright reds becoming soft grays, sharp blues gently turning neutral and pale. As Emma continues this calm visualization, anxiety's emotional intensity gradually diminishes, softly dissolving into neutral, emotionally muted imagery. With each quiet moment, Emma gently observes the anxious mental image softly losing its previous emotional power. Anxiety gently dissolves, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and emotional neutrality. Emma's breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscle tension releases gently, and sleep softly emerges, quietly guiding her restless mind toward peaceful restfulness. Emotional desaturation works effectively because emotional intensity directly relates to mental imagery's vividness and saturation. When anxious images remain bright, emotionally charged, and vivid, anxiety intensifies and persists. By softly visualizing anxious thoughts becoming muted and neutral, the subconscious mind quietly reduces anxiety's emotional resonance. Anxious thoughts naturally become harmless, neutral mental imagery, gently fading into subconscious background noise. Regular practice of emotional desaturation permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically neutralizing anxiety whenever emotionally saturated mental imagery emerges. Anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by peaceful neutrality and mental calmness. Tonight, if emotionally intense memories or worries threaten restful sleep, gently practice emotional desaturation. Softly acknowledge your anxious mental image clearly, calmly observing its vivid colors and emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Gently visualize this image softly fading, quietly losing color and emotional power, becoming muted, neutral, and harmless. Allow tranquility to naturally replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest assured, knowing your subconscious mind now automatically neutralizes emotionally charged imagery whenever anxiety emerges, creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Intentional forgetting method. Intentional forgetting method is an intriguingly paradoxical psychological approach skillfully designed to soothe a restless mind by softly encouraging it to deliberately and gently forget anxious thoughts, worries, or stressful memories. At first, the notion of intentionally forgetting might seem unusual or even impossible, as most people struggle precisely because they cannot forget the anxieties that keep them awake. Yet, beneath its mysterious appeal lies a subtle yet powerful strategy, harnessing the subconscious mind's natural capacity to let go of unwanted mental content, effortlessly guiding the restless mind toward tranquility and restful sleep. Anxiety often persists because the mind actively engages in replaying specific thoughts, memories, or fears. These persistent mental loops thrive on emotional attention, each repetition reinforcing anxiety's emotional power. Intentional forgetting method softly interrupts these loops by gently and consciously visualizing anxious thoughts fading from memory, quietly encouraging the subconscious mind to naturally and effortlessly release emotional attachment, softly dissolving anxiety's hold. Consider Jake, who frequently struggles with insomnia because of persistent worries about a conflict with his colleague. Every night, Jake's mind vividly replays arguments, imagined confrontations, and negative emotions, fueling anxiety and restlessness. Tonight, Jake chooses to practice intentional forgetting method as a calming mental exercise. Jake begins by gently acknowledging the anxious thought or memory clearly, softly observing its emotional intensity without judgment or resistance. Instead of confronting or actively suppressing anxiety, Jake calmly imagines deliberately forgetting this troubling thought. he softly visualizes the anxious memory or worry as a clearly written note placed gently into an imaginary stream of water, quietly observing as it calmly floats away downstream, becoming increasingly distant, indistinct, and faded. As Jake continues this quiet visualization, a subtle yet profound mental shift naturally occurs. Anxiety's emotional power weakens gently as the troubling thought softly fades into distant forgetfulness. His subconscious mind quietly accepts this intentional forgetting, naturally releasing emotional attachment to anxiety's repetitive loops. Jake's breathing gently deepens and slows, muscles effortlessly relax, and sleep softly emerges, quietly guiding his restless mind into peaceful restfulness. Intentional forgetting method succeeds effectively because anxiety depends heavily upon persistent emotional attachment and repetitive mental loops. Anxiety remains powerful precisely because thoughts feel emotionally intense, memorable, and personally significant. By softly visualizing anxious thoughts deliberately fading into forgetfulness, the subconscious mind gently disengages from emotional attachment. Anxious thoughts naturally diminish in frequency and intensity, replaced effortlessly by peaceful neutrality and calmness. Regular practice of intentional forgetting method permanently conditions the subconscious mind to automatically release anxious emotional attachments whenever troubling thoughts or memories emerge. Anxiety naturally diminishes, replaced gently by restful neutrality and mental tranquility. Tonight, if persistent anxieties or restless memories threaten peaceful sleep, softly practice intentional forgetting method. Calmly acknowledge your anxious thought clearly, gently observing its emotional intensity without judgment or resistance. Quietly visualize deliberately forgetting this anxious thought, softly placing it into an imaginary stream, calmly observing as it floats gently away, softly fading into distant forgetfulness. Allow tranquility to gently replace anxiety, quietly guiding your restless mind towards serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, knowing your subconscious mind now effortlessly practices intentional forgetting whenever anxiety emerges, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Disguised affirmation loop. Disguised affirmation loop is an elegantly subtle psychological technique, skillfully crafted to gently bypass the mind's habitual resistance to positive affirmations, softly embedding calming, reassuring beliefs directly into the subconscious. Affirmations have long been known to hold power in reshaping thought patterns, yet they often fail precisely because the conscious mind rejects overt positivity as false or unrealistic. Anxiety frequently resists direct affirmations, quickly dismissing their optimistic messages, thus maintaining its emotional grip. Disguised affirmation loop skillfully addresses this challenge, quietly introducing affirmations within neutral, subtle mental imagery, softly embedding peaceful thoughts and emotional tranquility beneath conscious awareness. The true power of disguised affirmation loop lies in its ability to gently sidestep the conscious mind's skepticism. Anxiety thrives on automatic negative thoughts, persistent loops of worry, fear, and stress that resist direct positive messages. Disguised affirmation loop softly incorporates calming affirmations into neutral, seemingly unrelated mental narratives or imagery, quietly allowing these positive messages to bypass mental resistance and gently influence subconscious thought patterns directly. Consider Maya, who frequently lies awake due to anxiety about her professional abilities and self-worth. Each night, her mind replays negative internal dialogues, thoughts that repeatedly criticize and doubt her capabilities. Maya has previously tried direct affirmations, but her anxious mind quickly rejects them as unrealistic or untrue, intensifying stress. Tonight, Maya decides to practice disguised affirmation loop as a calming mental technique. Maya begins by softly visualizing a gentle, neutral scenario completely unrelated to her anxieties, perhaps imagining herself calmly walking through a peaceful garden, observing subtle details like blooming flowers, sunlight filtering through leaves, and gentle bird song in the distance. As Maya quietly continues this neutral visualization, she gently incorporates disguised affirmations, softly embedding subtle, indirect statements of self-worth and confidence into the mental imagery itself. Rather than directly stating, "I am capable" or "I am confident," Maya softly visualizes subtle metaphors within her peaceful scenario, imagining a flower gracefully blooming, strong trees standing firmly, or gentle sunlight warmly illuminating her path. These neutral images quietly symbolize growth, strength, and calm confidence, indirectly embedding positive affirmations gently beneath her conscious awareness. As Maya continues this subtle mental loop, she gently notices a profound yet quiet shift occurring within her subconscious. Anxiety's emotional intensity gradually diminishes, gently dissolving into peaceful neutrality and calmness. Because her mind accepts these affirmations, quietly disguised within neutral imagery, subconscious resistance softly fades, replaced effortlessly by tranquility. Maya's breathing naturally deepens, muscles softly relax, and sleep gently emerges, guiding her restless mind quietly towards serene restfulness. Disguised affirmation. Loop succeeds effectively because the conscious mind instinctively resists overt positivity during anxious states, quickly rejecting direct affirmations as unrealistic or untrue. Anxiety remains powerful precisely because subconscious resistance maintains negative thought loops. By softly embedding affirmations within neutral mental narratives or subtle symbolic imagery, subconscious resistance quietly dissolves, effortlessly accepting calming, reassuring beliefs directly beneath conscious awareness. Regular practice of disguised affirmation. Loop permanently conditions the subconscious mind, automatically accepting subtle positive affirmations whenever anxiety emerges. Anxiety's frequency and emotional intensity naturally diminish, replaced effortlessly by calm neutrality and mental tranquility. Tonight, if persistent anxieties threaten restful sleep, gently practice disguised affirmation loop. Softly visualize a neutral, peaceful scenario, quietly observing subtle details without emotional resistance. Calmly incorporate subtle, indirect positive affirmations disguised within your imagery, metaphors of strength, growth, and confidence. Allow tranquility to gently replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind towards serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, assured your subconscious mind now effortlessly accepts subtle affirmations, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Mental cinema pause. Mental cinema pause is a quietly powerful psychological method uniquely crafted to help a restless, anxious mind gently release persistent thought loops, effortlessly creating a space of mental stillness and tranquility that naturally leads to restful sleep. Anxiety often arises because the mind repeatedly replays stressful images, worries, or imagined scenarios, each loop intensifying emotional distress and restlessness. Mental cinema. Pause subtly interrupts these loops by softly visualizing anxious thoughts as scenes on a mental movie screen, then gently pausing the mental imagery, quietly dissolving anxiety's emotional intensity. At night, anxiety frequently plays out vividly, like scenes projected onto an internal mental cinema, detailed, emotionally charged imagery, repeatedly capturing the subconscious mind's attention. These repetitive mental movies continuously replay stressful memories or imagined scenarios, causing emotional tension and insomnia. Mental cinema pause gently leverages the subconscious mind's natural responsiveness to visualization, quietly introducing a deliberate pause within anxiety's repetitive loops. Consider Sarah, who frequently struggles to sleep because her mind constantly replays stressful conversations and conflicts from work. Every night, Sarah's subconscious projects vivid mental scenes, colleagues' expressions, angry exchanges, and emotional tension, like intense movies replaying continuously within her mind. Anxiety intensifies with each repetition, keeping restful sleep frustratingly elusive. Tonight, Sarah chooses to practice mental cinema pause as a calming mental exercise. Sarah begins by softly acknowledging the anxious mental imagery clearly, calmly observing it without emotional resistance or judgment. Rather than confronting or suppressing anxiety directly, Sarah gently visualizes her anxious thoughts as scenes projected quietly onto an imaginary cinema screen within her mind. She softly watches the vivid emotional imagery clearly yet neutrally, as an impartial observer watching a movie. Next, Sarah gently imagines pressing a soft mental pause button, quietly visualizing the anxious mental movie becoming still, frozen, and silent. As she softly maintains this quiet pause, she notices a profound yet gentle mental shift occurring. Anxiety's emotional intensity gradually weakens, softly dissolving into neutral, motionless mental imagery, because the subconscious mind instinctively responds to paused imagery by reducing emotional engagement. Anxiety naturally diminishes, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and calmness. Sarah continues gently maintaining the mental pause, quietly observing the still, neutral imagery without emotional attachment. Her breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscles effortlessly relax, and sleep gently emerges, softly guiding Sarah's restless mind toward peaceful restfulness. Mental cinema pause succeeds effectively because anxiety depends heavily upon continuous emotional engagement with vivid, moving mental imagery. When the subconscious mind repeatedly replays emotionally charged scenarios, anxiety intensifies. By softly introducing a deliberate mental pause within this repetitive imagery, emotional engagement gently dissolves. The subconscious instinctively reduces emotional intensity during pause, mental scenes, naturally replacing anxiety with peaceful neutrality and calm. Regular practice of mental cinema. Pause permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically dissolving anxiety's emotional grip whenever repetitive mental loops emerge. Anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by restful neutrality and mental tranquility. Tonight, if repetitive anxieties or restless thoughts threaten peaceful sleep, gently practice mental cinema pause. Calmly visualize your anxious thoughts as vivid scenes softly projected onto an imaginary mental cinema screen. Without emotional resistance, gently press an imaginary mental pause button, quietly observing the anxious imagery become motionless, silent, and neutral. Allow tranquility to softly replace anxiety, quietly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, assured your subconscious mind now effortlessly pauses anxious mental movies whenever they emerge, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Psychological distance expansion. Psychological distance expansion is an exceptionally powerful yet subtle mental technique, specifically crafted to gently free the restless mind from the grip of anxiety by quietly increasing the perceived emotional distance between oneself and troubling thoughts or experiences. Anxiety often grows powerful because stressful memories, worries, or fears feel emotionally close, vividly real, immediate, and intensely personal. By gently and deliberately expanding the psychological distance between oneself and anxious thoughts, the subconscious mind naturally perceives them as emotionally neutral, quiet, and distant, effortlessly guiding the mind toward restful tranquility. To fully understand psychological distance expansion, consider how emotional intensity frequently relates directly to how close or immediate a thought or memory feels. Anxieties often persist precisely because the subconscious mind experiences them vividly, mentally replaying stressful events as if they are happening right now. Psychological distance expansion softly reverses this tendency by calmly visualizing anxiety-producing thoughts or experiences becoming progressively more distant, softly dissolving their emotional intensity. Imagine Andrew, who frequently struggles nightly with insomnia due to persistent anxiety about an argument with a family member. Each evening, Andrew's mind vividly replays emotionally charged scenes, the harsh words, hurt feelings, and emotional tension repeatedly looping through his consciousness. Tonight, Andrew decides to practice psychological distance expansion as a calming mental exercise. Andrew begins by softly acknowledging the anxious memory clearly, calmly observing its vivid emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Instead of confronting anxiety directly, Andrew gently visualizes this troubling memory, softly moving further away, quietly becoming distant and indistinct. He calmly imagines the anxious scene as if watching it through a telescope or from behind a window, softly and progressively increasing the imagined distance, quietly feeling the emotional intensity naturally diminish with each step backward. As Andrew continues gently expanding this psychological distance, a profound yet subtle mental shift naturally occurs. Anxiety's emotional power gently weakens, softly dissolving into neutral, distant mental imagery, because the subconscious mind instinctively perceives emotionally distant experiences as harmless and neutral. Anxiety naturally fades, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and calmness. Andrew gently continues this quiet visualization, softly observing the anxious memory become distant, blurry, and emotionally neutral. His breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscles softly relax, and sleep gently emerges, quietly guiding his restless mind toward peaceful restfulness. Psychological distance expansion succeeds effectively because anxiety thrives upon emotional immediacy and vividness. When stressful memories or thoughts feel emotionally close and immediate, anxiety intensifies and persists. By gently increasing psychological distance, softly visualizing anxious experiences becoming distant, the subconscious mind naturally reduces emotional engagement, effortlessly replacing anxiety with peaceful neutrality and mental calmness. Regular practice of psychological distance expansion permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically creating psychological distance whenever anxiety emerges. Anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by restful neutrality and tranquility. Tonight, if anxious memories or persistent worries threaten restful sleep, gently practice psychological distance expansion. Calmly acknowledge your anxious thought clearly, softly observing its vivid emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Quietly visualize this anxious experience softly moving further away, gently increasing imagined psychological distance. Allow tranquility to naturally replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest assured, knowing your subconscious mind now effortlessly creates psychological distance whenever anxiety emerges, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Mental gravity shift. Mental gravity shift is a quietly transformative psychological technique designed to gently guide a restless, anxious mind toward deep tranquility and restful sleep. At first, the concept may seem unusual, even intriguing, because gravity is typically perceived as a fixed physical law rather than a psychological experience. Yet beneath this seemingly paradoxical approach lies a subtle and powerful mental strategy. By softly visualizing anxious thoughts as objects gently influenced by gravity, the subconscious mind naturally perceives them as manageable and neutral, effortlessly dissolving emotional intensity and guiding the mind toward restful calmness. Anxiety frequently becomes amplified because stressful thoughts, memories, or imagined scenarios feel heavy, emotionally charged, and persistently present within consciousness. The mind instinctively struggles against this mental heaviness, creating tension, resistance, and restlessness. Mental gravity shift gently reverses this pattern by calmly visualizing anxious thoughts, softly shifting their perceived weight, quietly transforming them into effortlessly manageable mental objects influenced by imagined gravity. Imagine Claire, who frequently struggles nightly with anxiety about an unresolved disagreement with a close friend. Each evening, Claire's mind replays emotionally heavy scenes, harsh words, hurt feelings, and imagined negative outcomes, continuously looping through her subconscious mind. Anxiety grows heavier with each repetition, keeping restful sleep frustratingly elusive. Tonight, Claire chooses to practice mental gravity shift as a calming mental exercise. Claire begins by softly acknowledging the anxious thought or memory clearly, calmly observing its emotional heaviness without resistance or judgment. Instead of confronting or actively suppressing anxiety, Claire gently visualizes this troubling thought as a softly floating object, perhaps a balloon gently drifting in front of her. At first, the balloon appears heavy, weighed down by emotional anxiety, hovering close and imposing. Next, Claire quietly imagines gently altering the imagined gravity surrounding this mental balloon, softly visualizing its emotional weight becoming lighter, calmly feeling it effortlessly drifting upward, softly moving further away. With each quiet moment, Claire gently feels anxiety's emotional heaviness softly shifting into neutral lightness, the balloon gently drifting upward until it becomes distant and indistinct. As Claire continues this gentle visualization, she notices a profound yet subtle mental shift naturally occurring. Anxiety's emotional intensity softly weakens, gently dissolving into distant, neutral mental imagery. Because the subconscious mind instinctively perceives emotionally lighter experiences as harmless and neutral, anxiety naturally fades, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and calmness. Claire gently continues maintaining this mental gravity shift, softly observing anxious thoughts drifting gently upward, quietly becoming neutral and emotionally insignificant. Her breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscles softly relax, and sleep gently emerges, quietly guiding her restless mind toward peaceful restfulness. Mental gravity shift succeeds effectively because anxiety relies heavily upon perceived emotional heaviness and persistence. When anxious thoughts feel heavy, vivid, and persistently close, anxiety naturally intensifies and persists. By gently shifting mental gravity, softly visualizing anxious experiences as emotionally lighter, drifting, and distant, the subconscious mind naturally reduces emotional engagement, effortlessly replacing anxiety with peaceful neutrality and mental tranquility. Regular practice of mental gravity shift permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically shifting mental gravity whenever anxious thoughts emerge. Anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by restful neutrality and mental calmness. Tonight, if anxious memories or persistent worries threaten restful sleep, gently practice mental gravity shift. Calmly acknowledge your anxious thought clearly, softly observing its emotional heaviness without resistance or judgment. Quietly visualize this anxious experience softly becoming lighter, gently shifting mental gravity, quietly drifting upward and away. Allow tranquility to naturally replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest assured, knowing your subconscious mind now effortlessly shifts mental gravity whenever anxiety emerges, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Ego boundary collapse. Ego boundary collapse is a quietly profound psychological technique designed specifically to gently dissolve the rigid mental boundaries that separate the self from peaceful, restful states. Anxiety frequently thrives because the mind maintains strong, clearly defined boundaries, fixed concepts of identity, emotional reactions, and self-perceptions. These boundaries reinforce stress, worry, and restlessness by emphasizing separation and emotional resistance. Ego boundary collapse softly reverses this pattern by gently visualizing these rigid boundaries quietly dissolving, softly merging the restless mind into a state of peaceful unity and effortless tranquility. At first glance, the idea of collapsing ego boundaries may seem strange or even slightly unsettling. After all, most people rely on clear boundaries for their sense of identity and self-control. Yet beneath its intriguing appeal lies a deeply relaxing and calming mental strategy. Gently visualizing rigid ego boundaries, quietly dissolving naturally reduces emotional resistance, effortlessly guiding the subconscious mind towards serene restfulness and peace. Imagine Lucas, who frequently struggles nightly with insomnia caused by persistent anxiety about his social interactions. Each evening, Lucas's mind vividly reinforces strong boundaries around his identity, anxiously replaying scenarios where he feels separate, isolated, or socially inadequate. Anxiety grows stronger precisely because Lucas maintains a rigid, emotionally resistant boundary between himself and others. Tonight, Lucas chooses to practice ego boundary collapse as a calming mental exercise. Lucas begins by softly acknowledging these rigid mental boundaries clearly, calmly observing how he separates himself emotionally from the world around him. Rather than confronting or actively resisting anxiety directly, Lucas gently visualizes softly dissolving these rigid ego boundaries, quietly imagining himself gently merging with calm, neutral surroundings. He softly imagines his clearly defined sense of self gently becoming indistinct, calmly visualizing emotional boundaries quietly dissolving into peaceful unity. Lucas softly experiences a quiet sense of connection emerging, his mind gently merging with calm surroundings, subtly blending into peaceful neutrality. With each gentle visualization, Lucas softly feels anxiety's emotional intensity dissolving, quietly replaced by tranquility, serenity, and emotional ease. As Lucas continues gently maintaining this soft visualization, a profound yet quiet mental shift naturally occurs. Anxiety's emotional intensity gradually weakens, gently dissolving into peaceful, neutral mental imagery. Because the subconscious mind instinctively perceives unified, boundary-free mental states as calming and emotionally neutral, anxiety naturally fades, effortlessly replaced by restful tranquility and mental calmness. Lucas softly continues visualizing the quiet dissolution of rigid ego boundaries, gently feeling anxiety quietly dissolving into peaceful unity and neutrality. His breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscles softly relax, and sleep gently emerges, quietly guiding his restless mind towards serene restfulness. Ego boundary collapse works effectively because anxiety depends heavily upon rigid, emotionally resistant boundaries of identity and separation. Anxiety intensifies when thoughts or emotional experiences feel sharply separate and emotionally charged. By gently dissolving rigid mental boundaries, softly merging the self into peaceful neutrality, the subconscious mind naturally reduces emotional resistance, effortlessly replacing anxiety with tranquility and mental calmness. Regular practice of ego boundary collapse permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically dissolving rigid emotional boundaries whenever anxiety emerges. Anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by restful neutrality and mental tranquility. Tonight, if persistent anxieties or emotional resistance threaten restful sleep, gently practice ego boundary collapse. Calmly acknowledge rigid ego boundaries clearly, softly observing emotional separation without resistance or judgment. Quietly visualize gently dissolving these boundaries, softly merging into peaceful neutrality and unity. Allow tranquility to naturally replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, assured your subconscious mind now effortlessly dissolves rigid emotional boundaries whenever anxiety emerges, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Infinite corridor illusion. Infinite corridor illusion is a fascinating and gently powerful psychological method designed to softly interrupt anxious thought loops and guide the restless mind toward restful, peaceful sleep. Anxiety often becomes amplified precisely because the mind remains trapped in repetitive cycles, continuously replaying stressful thoughts, memories, or imagined scenarios. These repetitive loops create persistent emotional distress, intensifying restlessness and insomnia. The infinite corridor illusion skillfully interrupts these loops by quietly engaging the subconscious mind in a neutral, endless mental visualization, an infinitely extending corridor, softly dissolving anxiety's emotional grip and effortlessly creating conditions for tranquility and sleep. At night, anxiety frequently operates as a cycle of emotionally charged mental imagery, each stressful thought vividly replaying in consciousness. Anxiety thrives because these loops remain persistent, repetitive, and emotionally engaging. The infinite corridor illusion softly reverses this pattern by gently visualizing anxious thoughts quietly situated within a long, endless mental corridor, softly and infinitely extending outward, diminishing emotional intensity naturally through perceived mental distance. Imagine Hannah, who frequently struggles nightly with insomnia caused by persistent anxiety about her financial situation. Each night, Hannah's mind replays vivid, emotionally intense worries, imagining negative scenarios, financial failures, and stressful outcomes. Anxiety intensifies each repetition, keeping restful sleep frustratingly elusive. Tonight, Hannah chooses to practice infinite corridor illusion as a calming mental exercise. Hannah begins by softly acknowledging the anxious thoughts or imagined scenarios clearly, calmly observing their emotional intensity without resistance or judgment, rather than confronting or actively suppressing anxiety directly. Hannah gently visualizes herself softly standing at the entrance to an infinite, calm mental corridor, stretching gently into the distance. She calmly places the anxious thoughts quietly within this mental corridor, softly visualizing them, gently receding further and further away, becoming softly distant, neutral, and indistinct. With each gentle visualization, Hannah softly experienced anxiety's emotional intensity, quietly diminishing, softly dissolving into neutral mental imagery situated at infinite perceived distance. Because the subconscious mind instinctively perceives emotionally distant experiences as harmless and neutral, anxiety naturally fades, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and mental calmness. As Hannah continues gently visualizing the infinite corridor illusion, a profound yet subtle mental shift naturally occurs. Anxiety's repetitive loops gradually weaken, softly dissolving into distant, indistinct neutrality. Her breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscles softly relax, and sleep gently emerges, quietly guiding her restless mind towards serene restfulness. Infinite corridor illusion succeeds effectively because anxiety depends heavily upon repetitive emotional engagement and vivid mental imagery. When stressful thoughts repeatedly replay within close mental proximity, anxiety naturally intensifies and persists. By softly placing anxious thoughts quietly within an infinitely extending mental corridor, visualizing them softly receding into infinite distance, the subconscious mind naturally reduces emotional engagement, effortlessly replacing anxiety with peaceful neutrality and mental tranquility. Regular practice of infinite corridor illusion permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically placing anxious thoughts quietly into infinite mental distance. Whenever anxiety emerges, anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by restful neutrality and tranquility. Tonight, if repetitive anxieties or persistent worries threaten restful sleep, gently practice infinite corridor illusion. Calmly acknowledge anxious thoughts clearly, softly observing their emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Quietly visualize placing anxious imagery gently within an infinite, softly extending mental corridor, calmly observing anxiety gently receding into infinite distance. Allow tranquility to naturally replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, assured your subconscious mind now effortlessly dissolves anxiety whenever it emerges, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Reverse perspective thinking. Reverse perspective thinking is a quietly transformative psychological technique carefully designed to gently dissolve persistent anxiety and guide a restless mind effortlessly toward deep, restorative sleep. Anxiety often becomes amplified because thoughts, fears, or stressful memories are perceived vividly and personally, continuously viewed from a fixed emotional perspective. This repetitive personal viewpoint keeps anxiety emotionally intense, vivid, and disruptive. Reverse perspective thinking softly reverses this pattern by gently visualizing anxious scenarios from a completely opposite or neutral perspective, quietly observing thoughts as if from the viewpoint of another person or from a calm, distant vantage point, softly dissolving emotional intensity and effortlessly guiding the subconscious toward peaceful tranquility. At first, the concept of reversing mental perspectives may seem unusual or paradoxical. After all, anxious thoughts feel personal precisely because they're experienced from one's own emotional viewpoint. Yet, beneath its subtle appeal lies a powerful mental strategy. Gently and deliberately shifting perspective softly disrupts anxiety's emotional attachment, quietly allowing the subconscious mind to perceive anxious experiences as emotionally neutral, harmless, and peaceful. Imagine Jack, who frequently struggles nightly with anxiety about upcoming exams. Each evening, Jack vividly imagines stressful scenarios, failing questions, disappointing teachers, and embarrassing outcomes, continuously replayed from his intensely personal emotional viewpoint. Anxiety grows stronger precisely because Jack remains trapped in this repetitive emotional perspective. Tonight, Jack chooses to practice reverse perspective thinking as a calming mental exercise. Jack begins by softly acknowledging the anxious scenario clearly, calmly observing its emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Instead of confronting or actively suppressing anxiety, Jack gently visualizes quietly shifting his mental viewpoint, softly imagining, observing himself from an external, neutral perspective, perhaps the viewpoint of a close friend calmly watching him prepare for exams. As Jack gently continues this quiet visualization, he softly experiences anxiety's emotional intensity gradually diminishing. The anxious scenario previously vivid and emotionally charged, now appears softly neutral, calmly observed from a gentle external perspective, because the subconscious mind instinctively perceives experiences viewed from neutral or external viewpoints as emotionally distant. Anxiety naturally fades, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and calmness. Jack gently continues, maintaining reverse perspective thinking, softly observing anxious thoughts quietly from a calm external viewpoint. His breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscles softly relax, and sleep gently emerges, quietly guiding his restless mind towards serene restfulness. Reverse perspective. Thinking succeeds effectively because anxiety depends heavily upon emotional engagement and repetitive personal viewpoints. Anxiety intensifies when thoughts, memories, or fears continuously replay vividly from one's own emotionally charged perspective. By gently shifting perspective, softly visualizing anxious scenarios neutrally or externally, the subconscious mind naturally reduces emotional engagement, effortlessly replacing anxiety with peaceful neutrality and mental tranquility. Regular practice of reverse perspective thinking permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically shifting anxious viewpoints whenever anxiety emerges. Anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by restful neutrality and tranquility. Tonight, if persistent anxieties or vivid stressful thoughts threaten restful sleep, gently practice reverse perspective thinking. Calmly acknowledge anxious thoughts clearly, softly observing their emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Quietly visualize gently shifting your mental viewpoint, softly observing anxious scenarios calmly from an external, neutral perspective. Allow tranquility to naturally replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, assured your subconscious mind now effortlessly shifts anxious viewpoints whenever they emerge, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Shadow thought integration. Shadow thought integration is a quietly powerful psychological method designed specifically to gently soothe the restless mind by softly engaging and integrating those hidden, troubling thoughts that often linger unnoticed within subconscious shadows. Anxiety frequently thrives precisely because certain stressful memories, fears, or uncomfortable emotions remain suppressed, hidden, and unacknowledged, operating quietly yet persistently beneath conscious awareness. These shadow thoughts subtly fuel anxiety, creating emotional tension and restlessness. Shadow thought integration softly reverses this pattern by gently recognizing, accepting, and quietly integrating these hidden anxious thoughts, naturally dissolving their emotional power and guiding the subconscious toward peaceful tranquility. At first glance, the concept of engaging with shadow thoughts may feel unsettling. Most people instinctively avoid or suppress troubling emotions, yet beneath its intriguing surface lies a deeply calming strategy. By gently acknowledging and softly integrating hidden subconscious anxieties, emotional resistance quietly dissolves, effortlessly guiding the restless mind toward restful peace and calmness. Imagine Sophie, who frequently struggles nightly with anxiety and insomnia but cannot precisely identify why. Each night, Sophie's mind feels tense, restless, and anxious, though she consciously struggles to understand the source. Unrecognized shadow thoughts quietly persist beneath her awareness. Unresolved emotions, hidden fears, or subtle regrets, continuously fueling anxiety's emotional tension. Tonight, Sophie chooses to practice shadow thought integration as a calming mental exercise. Sophie begins by softly acknowledging that hidden shadow thoughts quietly exist within her subconscious mind. Instead of confronting or actively resisting anxiety, Sophie gently invites these hidden emotions quietly forward, softly creating space for them to gently surface into conscious awareness. She calmly allows previously suppressed thoughts or subtle anxieties quietly to reveal themselves, softly observing them clearly yet neutrally, without judgment or emotional resistance. With each gentle moment, Sophie quietly recognizes and softly integrates each emerging shadow thought into conscious awareness, calmly acknowledging them without emotional struggle. As she continues this gentle mental exercise, Sophie softly notices a profound yet quiet mental shift naturally occurring. Anxiety's previously hidden emotional tension gradually weakens, softly dissolving into neutral emotional acceptance and calmness. Because the subconscious mind instinctively releases emotional tension when shadow thoughts become quietly integrated, anxiety naturally fades, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and peaceful neutrality. Sophie gently continues, shadow thought integration, softly allowing hidden anxieties quietly to surface and become calmly integrated. Her breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscles softly relax, and sleep gently emerges, quietly guiding her restless mind towards serene restfulness. Shadow thought integration succeeds effectively because anxiety often originates from hidden, unacknowledged emotional tensions operating quietly within subconscious shadows. Anxiety intensifies precisely because these shadow thoughts remain suppressed, hidden, and emotionally resistant. By softly acknowledging and gently integrating hidden anxieties, emotional resistance quietly dissolves, effortlessly replacing anxiety with restful neutrality and mental tranquility. Regular practice of shadow thought integration permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically integrating hidden shadow thoughts whenever anxiety emerges. Anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by peaceful neutrality and mental calmness. Tonight, if hidden anxieties or subtle emotional tensions threaten restful sleep, gently practice shadow thought integration. Calmly acknowledge the quiet existence of hidden shadow thoughts, clearly, softly allowing suppressed anxieties gently to surface without resistance or judgment. Quietly integrate these emerging emotions into conscious awareness, softly observing their emotional tension naturally dissolving. Allow tranquility to gently replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, assured your subconscious mind now effortlessly integrates hidden anxieties whenever they emerge, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. Imagined sound barrier. Imagined sound barrier is an intriguingly subtle psychological technique designed specifically to gently quiet the restless, anxious mind by softly constructing a mental barrier of imagined sound, effortlessly blocking emotional tension and creating conditions of deep, restful sleep. Anxiety frequently becomes amplified at night because troubling thoughts, worries, or memories continuously replay vividly within the subconscious mind, each repetition emotionally intense and disruptive. Imagined sound barrier skillfully interrupts this pattern by softly engaging the subconscious mind to create a gentle mental barrier of soothing, neutral sounds, quietly absorbing anxious emotional energy and guiding the mind effortlessly toward tranquility. At first glance, the concept of constructing an imagined sound barrier may seem paradoxical. Most people instinctively associate barriers with physical structures or visual images rather than mental sounds. Yet beneath its intriguing appeal lies a profoundly calming mental strategy. Gently visualizing or mentally hearing calming, neutral sounds quietly creates a subtle yet powerful barrier between the subconscious mind and anxiety's emotional intensity. Imagine Lucas, who frequently struggles nightly with persistent anxiety about his job security. Each evening, Lucas's mind vividly replays stressful scenarios, imagining negative outcomes, potential failures, and financial worries. Each replay emotionally intense and vividly disruptive. Anxiety intensifies precisely because these vivid mental scenarios remain emotionally charged and persistently present. Tonight, Lucas chooses to practice imagined sound barrier as a calming mental exercise. Lucas begins by softly acknowledging the anxious thoughts or imagery clearly, calmly observing their emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Rather than confronting or actively suppressing anxiety, Lucas gently visualizes himself quietly surrounded by a softly humming mental barrier of soothing neutral sound, perhaps gentle rainfall, a softly murmuring river, or distant ocean waves. He calmly imagines these peaceful mental sounds softly encircling him, gently absorbing and quietly neutralizing anxiety's emotional intensity. With each quiet visualization, Lucas softly feels anxiety's emotional power gently weakening, quietly dissolving into neutral mental imagery. Because the subconscious mind instinctively perceives gentle, calming sounds as safe and emotionally neutral, anxiety naturally fades, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and restful calmness. Lucas gently continues imagined sound barrier, softly maintaining the soothing mental sounds quietly surrounding him. His breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscles gently relax, and sleep softly emerges, quietly guiding his restless mind towards serene restfulness. Imagined sound barrier succeeds effectively because anxiety depends heavily upon emotional engagement and repetitive mental imagery. Anxiety intensifies precisely because stressful thoughts remain emotionally vivid, intrusive, and persistently present. By softly constructing a mental barrier of calming, neutral sounds, quietly absorbing and neutralizing emotional tension, the subconscious mind naturally reduces anxiety's emotional intensity, effortlessly replacing anxiety with peaceful neutrality and mental tranquility. Regular practice of imagined sound barrier permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically constructing mental barriers of calming sound whenever anxiety emerges. Anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by restful neutrality and tranquility. Tonight, if persistent anxieties or intrusive stressful thoughts threaten restful sleep, gently practice imagined sound barrier. Calmly acknowledge anxious thoughts or imagery clearly, softly observing emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Quietly visualize gently surrounding yourself with calming mental sounds, a softly humming mental barrier absorbing anxiety's emotional tension. Allow tranquility to gently replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, assured your subconscious mind now effortlessly constructs imagined sound barriers whenever anxiety emerges, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep. False awakening simulation. False awakening simulation is an intriguingly powerful psychological technique specifically designed to gently guide a restless mind toward deep tranquility and restful sleep by softly simulating a quiet awakening from anxious thoughts. At first, the idea might seem paradoxical or even slightly mysterious. After all, why simulate awakening when struggling to sleep? Yet beneath its subtle, intriguing surface lies a gentle yet deeply calming mental strategy. By softly imagining oneself gently waking up from an anxious thought scenario into a neutral, peaceful reality, the subconscious mind naturally dissolves emotional intensity, effortlessly creating restful mental conditions. Anxiety frequently thrives precisely because troubling thoughts, memories, or imagined worries feel persistently real and emotionally intense within consciousness. Each vivid replay or mental loop amplifies emotional tension, restlessness, and insomnia. False awakening simulation gently reverses this pattern by softly guiding the subconscious mind to imagine gently awakening from these anxious mental scenarios, quietly perceiving them as merely dreams or imagined experiences, softly dissolving their emotional hold. Consider Emma, who frequently struggles nightly with persistent anxiety about upcoming social interactions. Each evening, Emma's subconscious mind vividly replays stressful scenarios, imagining awkward conversations, embarrassment, and negative social judgments. Anxiety intensifies each repetition precisely because these mental scenarios feel vividly real, emotionally charged, and persistently present. Tonight, Emma chooses to practice false awakening simulation as a calming mental exercise. Emma begins by softly acknowledging the anxious thought scenario clearly, calmly observing its vivid emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Rather than actively confronting or suppressing anxiety directly, Emma gently visualizes softly waking up from this anxious mental scenario, quietly imagining herself softly opening her eyes, gently realizing the stressful experience was merely an imagined dream or mental construct. With each gentle visualization, Emma softly experiences anxiety's emotional intensity quietly diminishing. Because the subconscious mind instinctively perceives imagined scenarios as emotionally neutral, once identified as dreams or false awakenings, anxiety naturally fades, replaced effortlessly by tranquility and restful neutrality. Emma gently continues false awakening simulation, softly imagining repeated gentle awakenings from each anxious mental scenario. Her breathing naturally deepens and slows, muscles softly relax, and sleep gently emerges, quietly guiding her restless mind towards serene restfulness. False awakening simulation succeeds effectively because anxiety depends heavily upon emotional vividness and perceived reality of troubling thoughts or imagined scenarios. Anxiety intensifies precisely because subconscious mental imagery remains persistently vivid and emotionally intense. By softly imagining gently awakening from anxious scenarios, quietly perceiving them as neutral imagined dreams, the subconscious mind naturally dissolves emotional intensity, effortlessly replacing anxiety with peaceful neutrality and mental tranquility. Regular practice of false awakening simulation permanently retrains the subconscious mind, automatically simulating gentle awakenings whenever anxious thoughts emerge. Anxiety naturally diminishes in frequency and emotional intensity, replaced effortlessly by restful neutrality and tranquility. Tonight, if persistent anxieties or vividly stressful thoughts threaten restful sleep, gently practice false awakening simulation. Calmly acknowledge anxious mental scenarios clearly, softly observing their emotional intensity without resistance or judgment. Quietly visualize gently waking up from these stressful scenarios, softly perceiving them as neutral dreams or imagined experiences. Allow tranquility to gently replace anxiety, softly guiding your restless mind into serene, deep, rejuvenating sleep. Rest peacefully, assured your subconscious mind now effortlessly simulates gentle awakenings whenever anxiety emerges, automatically creating perfect conditions of calmness, relaxation, and restful sleep.